My son-in-law and his father threw my pregnant daughter off their yacht at midnight. She hit something in the water and was drowning in the Atlantic. I screamed for help, but they just laughed and left. When the Coast Guard pulled her out 3 hours later, I called my brother and said, "It is time to end them." If you have ever been underestimated by people who thought they owned the world, hit like and subscribe. My name is Luther Grimes, and I am going to tell you how I made them pay for every drop of water my daughter swallowed. The wind on the deck of the Gilded Lady was biting cold, but it was nothing compared to the chill coming from the man sitting across from my daughter. It was midnight, in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and the only light came from the dim yellow lamps lining the mahogany railing of the yacht. My daughter Zoe was 7 months pregnant, clutching her belly with one hand and a pen in the other. Her hand was trembling so hard the pen rattled against the glass table. Across from her sat Conrad Remington, my daughter's father-in-law. He looked like a king on a throne holding a crystal glass of scotch that cost more than my first car. Next to him stood Hunter, my son-in-law, the man who had promised to protect her. But tonight, Hunter wasn't looking at his wife. He was looking at his watch, as if he had somewhere better to be. "Just sign the papers, Zoe," Conrad said, his voice smooth like oil on a driveway. "It is a standard procedure. The trust fund for the baby needs to be managed by the family estate. You are just signing over executorship. That is all." I stood in the shadows near the cabin door, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. I wanted to step forward, but 2 of Conrad's private security guards were standing right behind me, their presence heavy and threatening. I was just the father-in-law, the retired mechanic with grease under his fingernails invited along on this trip as a charity case, or so they thought. Zoe looked up at Hunter, her eyes wide and pleading. "Hunter," she whispered, "this document says I waive all rights to the $5 million trust my grandmother left for the baby. It says the Remington Corporation becomes the sole beneficiary until the child is 25. Why would I sign this?" Hunter finally looked at her. He ran a hand through his perfect blonde hair and sighed, the sound of a man bored with his own life. "Because we need the liquidity, Zoe. Dad's company has a few short-term cash flow issues. We will put it back. We just need to borrow against the trust for a few months." A few months, I thought bitterly. I knew better. I had seen men like Conrad Remington before. They didn't borrow. They took. "I am not signing it," Zoe said, her voice gaining a fraction of strength. "That money is for my son. It is the only thing that is truly his. You told me the company was doing fine, Hunter. You told me we were safe." Conrad set his glass down. The sound was sharp against the glass table. The mask of the benevolent patriarch slipped, and for the first time I saw the shark underneath. "You listened to me, you ungrateful girl," Conrad hissed. "My son pulled you out of the gutter. He gave you a last name that opens doors you are not even qualified to walk through. You think that $5 million belongs to you, or that fetus inside you. It belongs to this family, and you will sign it over, or you will walk off this boat with nothing." I stepped forward, my old boots heavy on the teak deck. "She said no, Conrad," I growled, my voice low and raspy from years of breathing sea salt and engine smoke. "We are done here. Hunter, take us back to the port." Conrad laughed. It was a dry, soulless sound. He didn't even look at me. He just flicked his fingers at his guards. "Keep the help quiet," he said. One of the guards, a man the size of a vending machine, grabbed my shoulder. His grip was like iron. "Stay put, old man," he muttered. "This is family business." I struggled, but at 70 years old, my strength wasn't what it used to be. Not against muscle like that. I was forced to watch as Hunter moved closer to Zoe. The handsome face my daughter had fallen in love with twisted into something ugly, something desperate. "Sign the paper, Zoe," Hunter spat. "Stop being so selfish. Do you have any idea how much debt I am in? Do you know what kind of people are looking for me?" Zoe recoiled as if he had slapped her. "Debt," she stammered. "You said the gambling was over. You swore on our wedding day." "I lied," Hunter screamed, and the sound tore through the silence of the ocean night. "I lied because I needed your grandmother's money. I lied because you were the easiest mark in the city. Do you really think I married you for love? Look at you, and look at me." The words hung in the air, toxic and irreversible. Zoe went still. The tears stopped falling. She looked at the man she had married, the father of the child kicking inside her, and she finally saw him. She stood up, shaky on her feet, but her chin was high. It was the same look her mother used to give me when she knew she was right. "I am not signing," she said quietly, "and as soon as we get to shore, I am filing for divorce." The silence that followed lasted only a second, but it felt like an hour. Then Hunter moved. His hand lashed out fast and brutal. The sound of his palm connecting with my daughter's face was the loudest thing I had ever heard. Zoe cried out and crumbled to the deck, hitting her hip hard against the metal leg of the table. "No," I roared. I threw my weight backward, slamming my elbow into the guard's gut. He grunted, loosening his grip just enough. I lunged toward my daughter, but the second guard tackled me, slamming my face into the hard wood of the deck. I tasted blood. I felt a knee press into my spine, pinning me down like an insect. From my position on the floor, I saw Hunter standing over Zoe. She was curled up, protecting her belly, sobbing. Blood trickled from her lip, staining the white deck. "You useless woman," Hunter snarled. "If you won't sign, then you are worth more to me dead." Conrad stood up, calmly adjusting his expensive suit jacket. He looked at his son and nodded, as if approving a business transaction. "The insurance policy is $10 million, Hunter," he said coldly. "That covers the gambling debt and leaves enough to refinance the Midtown project." "Do it." My heart stopped beating. Insurance policy. They hadn't brought us out here for a vacation. They hadn't brought us out here to negotiate. This was a hit. Zoe scrambled backward on the deck, her heels scraping against the wood. "Dad," she screamed, reaching out to me. "Daddy, help me." I fought. I fought with every ounce of rage and love in my body. I kicked and thrashed, screaming curses that would make a sailor blush. But the guards were too strong. They held me down, forcing me to watch. Hunter grabbed Zoe by her arms. She kicked and screamed, but he was a large man fueled by the desperate strength of a coward. He dragged her toward the railing. "Please, Hunter," Zoe begged. "Not me, the baby. It is your son." Hunter didn't even blink. "I don't want a son," he said. "I want my life back." Conrad stepped in to help, grabbing her legs. Together, my son-in-law and his father lifted my pregnant daughter off the deck. She flailed her hand, catching the railing for a split second, her eyes locking with mine. They were filled with absolute terror. "Daddy," she whispered. Then they shoved her. She went over the side into the black abyss of the Atlantic. There was a sickening thud as her body hit something on the way down. Maybe the lower hull, maybe a stabilizer fin, followed by a splash that sounded too heavy, too final. "Zoe!" I screamed. My voice broke, tearing my throat. I heard her scream from the water, a gurgling, terrified sound that was quickly swallowed by the roar of the engines. Conrad walked over to the railing and looked down calmly, lighting a cigar. "Shame," he said. "Tragic accident. Drunk woman slips on a wet deck. Very sad." He turned to me, a smirk playing on his lips. "And you, Luther? Who is going to believe you? You were just a senile old mechanic with a history of alcohol abuse. That is what the report will say. That you tried to save her, but you were too weak, too old." Hunter looked pale, but he was smiling a sick, twisted smile of relief. "We need to get rid of him, Dad," he said. "We can't kill him too. It looks suspicious if everyone dies." Conrad nodded. "Put him in the dinghy. Cut the line. Let him drift. If the ocean takes him, it takes him. If he is found, he will be rambling and incoherent from dehydration. Perfect witness for the defense." The guards hauled me up. I didn't fight them this time. I needed to be free. I needed to be in the water. They dragged me to the stern, where the small emergency dinghy was tied. They threw me into it like a sack of garbage. I landed hard, my shoulder popping with a sharp pain. "Have a nice cruise," Luther Conrad called out from above. "Try not to die too quickly." Hunter cut the rope. The dinghy dropped away from the yacht, drifting instantly into the dark, churning wake. As the lights of the Gilded Lady began to pull away, fading into the mist, I didn't cower in the bottom of that boat. I didn't cry. I didn't pray for my own safety. I scrambled to the edge of the dinghy, scanning the black waves. The water was freezing, the current was strong, and my daughter was out there, hurt and alone. I stood up, balanced against the violent rocking of the small boat. "I am not the senile old man you think I am, Conrad," I whispered to the darkness. "And you just made the biggest mistake of your life." I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cold, salty air, and I dove into the black ocean. The shock of the water was like 1,000 needles piercing my skin. It was pitch black under the surface, a void so complete it felt like being buried alive. I kicked toward the surface, gasping for air as I broke the waves. "Zoe!" I shouted, spitting out salt water. "Zoe! Keep talking to me, baby. Let me hear you." The yacht was moving away, its engine noise fading, but in the silence that followed, I heard it. A faint splash, a moan of pain. Here, a voice whimpered. "Daddy." She was alive. I started swimming. My old joints burned, my clothes weighed me down like lead anchors, but I swam with the strength of a man who had nothing left to lose but his child. I found her clinging to a piece of driftwood, probably debris from a storm. Her face was pale in the moonlight, her lips turning blue. She was holding her arm at an awkward angle, and blood was mixing with the seawater around her. "I got you, baby," I gasped, wrapping my arm around her good side. "I got you. Do not let go." "My stomach hurts, Daddy," she whispered, her teeth chattering violently. "It hurts so bad." I knew what that meant. The stress, the impact, the cold. She was going into labor, or worse. We were miles from shore, floating in freezing water, with nothing but the clothes on our backs. Conrad and Hunter thought they had disposed of us. They thought they had written the end of our story. But as I held my daughter's head above the waves, treading water in the endless dark, I felt a fire ignite in my chest that was hotter than any cold the Atlantic could throw at me. They didn't know about my past. They didn't know I wasn't just a mechanic. They didn't know about the patent I held for underwater navigation systems that had made me a silent multimillionaire years ago. And they certainly didn't know about my brother Julius. Julius, who wasn't just a retired Coast Guard admiral, but a man who currently advised the highest levels of national security. A man who could shut down a bank account or airspace with a single phone call. Hunter had thrown the wrong girl off the boat. "Hang on, Zoe," I whispered into her wet hair. "Just hang on. When we get out of this, I am going to burn their world down, and I am going to let you hold the match. But first, we had to survive the night." And the sharks, both in the water and waiting for us on land, were beginning to circle. The Atlantic Ocean in the dead of night is not just water. It is a living, breathing monster that wants to swallow you whole. The cold was the first thing that hit us, a paralyzing shock that drove the air from my lungs and made my heart stutter. I was treading water with one arm, my legs kicking rhythmically against the crushing weight of the deep, while my other arm was wrapped tight around Zoe's chest, keeping her head above the swells. She was heavy, dead weight in my arms, and I could feel the heat seeping out of her body with every second. The salt spray stung my eyes, blinding me, but I refused to blink. I refused to let go. "Daddy, it hurts," Zoe moaned, her voice barely audible over the crashing waves. "My stomach. It feels like it is tearing apart." I knew what was happening. The trauma, the fall, the freezing temperature. Her body was going into shock, and the baby was in distress. She was 7 months pregnant and floating in 50-degree water. "Listen to me, Zoe," I shouted, spitting out a mouthful of brine. "You have to breathe. Do not panic. Panic kills faster than the cold." I tried to assess her injuries in the dark. Her left arm was limp, dragging in the water, likely broken from hitting the hull on the way down. There was a gash on her forehead, bleeding sluggishly, the blood washing away instantly into the Black Sea. But it was the cramping that terrified me the most. She curled her legs up, screaming in agony as a contraction hit her. "Not now, baby." I prayed to a God I hadn't spoken to in years. "Please, not now. Not here." The ocean tossed us up a swell, and for a second I saw the horizon. Nothing. Just black water meeting black sky. We were miles from shore. The cold was beginning to gnaw at my bones, making my movements sluggish. My 60-year-old muscles were burning, screaming for rest, but I knew that if I stopped kicking, we would both sink. I looked at Zoe. Her eyes were rolling back in her head, her lips turning a terrifying shade of violet. She was giving up. I could feel her surrender in the way her body went slack. "Zoe, look at me!" I roared, shaking her. "Look at me! You are not going to die here. You are not going to let that bastard win. Think about your son. Think about the baby." She blinked, focusing on me with difficulty. "Hunter," she whispered. "He laughed, Daddy. He laughed when he pushed me." The rage that surged through me was the only thing keeping me warm. I held her tighter. "I know, baby, and he is going to pay." But first we have to survive. We drifted for what felt like an eternity. The cold began to affect my mind. I started seeing lights that weren't there, hearing engines that were just the wind. I knew we had maybe an hour before hypothermia shut our organs down. I needed a plan. I needed to stop being a victim and start being the man I used to be. Conrad Remington had called me a mechanic. He thought I was just a grease monkey who fixed engines. He didn't know who I really was. He didn't know that for 30 years I was a chief marine engineer. He didn't know that I held 3 patents for underwater gyroscopic stabilization. He didn't know that I knew these waters better than the fish that swam in them. I stopped fighting the current and started feeling it. I closed my eyes for a second, ignoring the panic, and focused on the movement of the water against my skin. The pull was steady, dragging us southeast. "We are in the Gulf Stream eddies," I muttered to myself, my teeth chattering. "The drift is 2 knots south. If we fight it, we die. We have to ride it." I looked at the debris Zoe was clutching. It was a piece of teak decking, heavy and waterlogged. It wasn't enough. I needed buoyancy. I needed to conserve heat. "Zoe," I said, my voice calm and authoritative, the voice of the engineer who had saved sinking ships before. "I need you to let go of the wood for 1 second. "No," she panicked, thrashing. "I will sink." "You won't sink, because I have you. Trust me." She let go, and I pulled her close. I struggled out of my heavy canvas jacket. It was soaked and pulling me down, but it was also my only resource. I didn't discard it. Instead, I tied the ends of the sleeves together in a tight square knot. I zipped the front all the way up. I treaded water, violently lifting the jacket above my head, and then slamming it down onto the surface of the water, trapping a bubble of air inside the back. It inflated like a crude balloon. "Grab this," I ordered, pushing the inflated jacket under Zoe's arms. "Hug it tight." She grabbed it, and the air pocket held her up. It wasn't a life vest, but it was enough to keep her head out of the water without her having to kick. It saved her energy. It saved her heat. "Now we wait," I said, gripping the collar of the jacket. "The current will take us past the shipping lane. They have to see us." We drifted for another hour. Zoe was drifting in and out of consciousness, her contractions coming closer together. I kept talking to her, telling her stories about her childhood, about her mother, about anything to keep her mind off the pain. Then I saw it, a searchlight. It swept across the water, a piercing beam of white cutting through the darkness. "Over here!" I screamed, waving my free arm. "Over here!" It was a Coast Guard cutter, the Valor. I recognized the class of the ship instantly. My brother Julius had commanded ships just like this one. The light swept past us, then snapped back, blinding me. A siren wailed. They had seen us. The relief was so intense it almost made me pass out. I watched as the cutter maneuvered closer, the roar of its engines, the sweetest sound I had ever heard. A rescue swimmer dove into the water, swimming toward us with powerful strokes. "I have got you, sir," the swimmer shouted, grabbing my harness. "I have got her. You are safe." As they hauled us up the side of the ship, wrapped us in thermal blankets and started assessing Zoe's condition, I allowed myself to think it was over. I allowed myself to think that the nightmare was behind us. I was wrong. The nightmare was just beginning. The ride back to the marina took 40 minutes. The Coast Guard medics were working on Zoe, stabilizing her arm and giving her oxygen. I sat wrapped in a silver blanket, shivering uncontrollably, my mind racing. I needed to call the police. I needed to call Julius. I needed to tell them what Hunter and Conrad had done. As the cutter docked at the port of Miami, I saw the flashing lights of police cars and ambulances. Good, I thought. They are here to arrest those monsters. The gangway lowered, and I tried to stand up, my legs wobbling. I wanted to be the one to tell the story. I wanted to point the finger. But as I stepped onto the dock, I froze. Standing there, surrounded by police officers, was Hunter. He wasn't in handcuffs. He was wrapped in a blanket, holding a cup of coffee, looking for all the world like a devastated husband. Beside him was a man I recognized, Sheriff Miller. A man known in the county for 2 things, his expensive taste in cars and his close friendship with Conrad Remington. Hunter saw me, and his face twisted into a mask of anguish. "There he is!" Hunter screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Get him away from her. Oh my God, Zoe." Before I could say a word, 2 police officers lunged at me. They grabbed my arms, twisting them behind my back with unnecessary force. "What are you doing?" I yelled, struggling. "He threw us over. Arrest him." Sheriff Miller stepped forward, blocking my view of Zoe, who was being loaded onto a stretcher. He looked at me with cold, dead eyes. "Luther Grimes, you are under arrest for the attempted murder of your daughter and unborn grandchild." "What?" I gasped, the air leaving my lungs. "You are lying. He did it. He and his father." Hunter sobbed loudly. A performance worthy of an award. "Officer, he has dementia. We were on the yacht having a family dinner. He just snapped. He started screaming that he had to save her from the demons, and he threw her over the rail. I tried to stop him, but he jumped in after her. It was a lie, so audacious, so evil, that for a second I couldn't speak. He was using my age against me. He was using the very thing Conrad had mocked me for. "That is a lie," I roared, thrashing against the cuffs. "Check the cameras on the boat. Check the crew." "The crew saw everything," Miller said calmly. "They gave statements an hour ago. They all confirm Mr. Remington's story. You were ranting and raving, Mr. Grimes. A tragic case of senile psychosis." I realized then how deep the trap was. Conrad had bought the crew. He had bought the sheriff. They had spent the last 3 hours not looking for us, but building the frame. "Zoe," I screamed as they dragged me toward the patrol car. "Zoe, tell them! Tell them the truth!" But Zoe was unconscious, an oxygen mask over her face, being loaded into the back of an ambulance. She couldn't hear me. She couldn't save me. Hunter walked up to the patrol car as they shoved me into the back seat. He leaned in so only I could hear. His eyes were dry, and his smile was the devil's own. "You should have drowned, old man," he whispered. "Now you are going to die in a cage, and I am going to spend that $10 million on a new yacht." The door slammed shut, sealing me in. As the siren wailed and the car sped away, I looked back at the ambulance taking my daughter away. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. The cold of the ocean had settled into my soul, and it had frozen my fear into something hard and sharp. They thought they had won. They thought the old mechanic was finished. But as I sat in the back of that police car, feeling the steel cuffs biting into my wrists, I started doing what engineers do. I started analyzing the structure of their trap, looking for the weak point. And I knew exactly who I needed to call. Not a lawyer, not a friend. I needed the Admiral. The holding cell was a concrete box that smelled of bleach and old sweat. There were no windows, just a single flickering fluorescent bulb, caged in wire mesh on the ceiling. I sat on the metal cot, my clothes still damp with seawater, my body shivering, not from the cold, but from a rage so intense it felt like it was burning my skin off. I had been screaming for an hour, demanding a lawyer, demanding a phone call, demanding to know if my daughter was still breathing. But Sheriff Miller had just laughed. He told me the system was down. He told me I had to wait for the arraignment judge in the morning. He told me to save my breath, because nobody listens to crazy old men who try to drown their own families. It was the isolation that was the real weapon. They knew exactly what they were doing. They were letting me stew in my own fear. Every second that ticked by on the wall clock outside the bars was a second Zoe might be dying. Was she in surgery? Was the baby alive? Was Hunter standing by her bed, playing the grieving husband while secretly hoping her heart monitor would flatline? I paced the cell, 4 steps forward, 4 steps back. My joints ached from the swim and the rough handling by the deputies. I looked at my hands. They were trembling. Conrad and Hunter were counting on this. They were counting on me breaking down. They were counting on the narrative of the confused, violent grandfather becoming the only truth anyone heard. I went to the bars and gripped them, my knuckles turning white. "Sheriff!" I shouted, my voice echoing in the empty corridor. "My daughter needs protection. That man is going to finish what he started." There was no answer, just the hum of the ventilation and the distant sound of a radio. I was buried. I was silenced. And for the first time in 70 years, I felt completely powerless. I was a man who could fix anything. I could rebuild a diesel engine in a storm. I could navigate a ship through a hurricane without GPS. But I couldn't fix this, not from inside a cage. Then I heard it, the click of the heavy steel door at the end of the hall. Footsteps approached, not the heavy thud of police boots, but the sharp, rhythmic clack of expensive Italian leather shoes. I moved back to the cot and sat down, composing my face. I would not let them see me beg. Conrad Remington appeared in front of my cell. He looked immaculate. He had changed out of his sailing clothes into a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my truck. He didn't look like a man who had just thrown two people into the ocean. He looked like a man stopping by to inspect a piece of faulty machinery. He stood there for a moment, looking at me through the bars, with a mixture of pity and disgust. Then he signaled to someone down the hall. A chair was brought. Conrad sat down, crossing his legs and lighting a cigar, ignoring the no smoking signs on the wall. "You look terrible, Luther," he said, blowing a plume of smoke toward me. "The sea air doesn't agree with you." I stared at him. I didn't say a word. I knew he hadn't come here to taunt me. Men like Conrad don't waste time on gloating unless there is a profit in it. He wanted something. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I am here to offer you a lifeline, Luther, because despite what you might think, I am not a monster. I am a pragmatist, and right now we have a messy situation that needs to be cleaned up." "Where is Zoe?" I asked, my voice rasping. "She is in the ICU," Conrad said casually, as if discussing the weather. "Critical condition, internal bleeding, placental abruption. The doctors are trying to save the baby, but it is touch and go. She needs emergency surgery, a very expensive, specialized surgery." He let that hang in the air. I felt my stomach twist. "Here is the problem," Conrad continued, examining the ash on his cigar. "Since you have been charged with attempted murder, her health insurance has frozen all authorizations. They call it a domestic incident under investigation. They won't pay a dime until the legal dust settles. And by then, well, Zoe doesn't have days, Luther, she has hours." He stood up and walked to the bars, wrapping his hands around them. "So here is the deal. You are going to plead guilty, but not to attempted murder. That is too ugly. You are going to plead to reckless endangerment due to diminished capacity. You will say you got confused. You will say you thought the boat was sinking and you were trying to save her. A tragic episode of dementia." I stood up and walked to the bars until I was inches from his face. "You want me to lie. You want me to tell the world I am crazy so you can get away with murder. I want you to save your daughter," Conrad snapped, his voice losing its smooth veneer. "If you sign the confession right now, admitting to your mental decline, I will pay for the surgery out of my own pocket. I will hire the best specialists in the state. Zoe lives. The baby lives. You go to a secure psychiatric facility for a few years instead of prison. Everybody wins." "And if I refuse?" I asked. Conrad shrugged. "Then I walk out of here. The insurance stays frozen. Zoe dies on the operating table because the hospital won't operate without payment guarantee. And you go to prison for double homicide. Because let us be honest, Luther, who is the jury going to believe? The pillar of the community or the mechanic who lives in a trailer?" I looked at him and I saw the absolute soullessness in his eyes. He was holding my daughter's life ransom to cover his own crime. It was the most evil thing I had ever witnessed. "Why?" I whispered. "Why are you doing this? You have everything, Conrad. You have the towers, the yachts, the reputation. Why kill her? Why kill your own grandson?" Conrad laughed a short, sharp bark of amusement. He took a drag from his cigar and looked at me with genuine incredulity. "You really don't know, do you? You think this is about control. You think this is about me being a mean old rich man." He shook his head and stepped closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "It is about math, Luther. Simple arithmetic." He held up his hand, counting off on his fingers. "Remington Tower is empty. It has been empty for 2 years. The tenants pulled out. The bank called the loan last week. Do you know how much the Remington Corporation owes as of this morning? $45 million. He said the number with a strange kind of pride, as if the magnitude of his failure was impressive in itself. "We are underwater. The yacht is leased. The house is mortgaged 3 times over. Hunter's gambling debts are just the tip of the iceberg. We are bleeding out." He pointed the cigar at me, his eyes gleaming with the manic energy of a cornered rat. "But 3 months ago, Hunter convinced Zoe to sign a new life insurance policy, a key person policy, tied to the family trust. Do you know the payout on a 32-year-old woman in perfect health? $10 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. $10 million. That was the price of my daughter's life. That was the price of my grandson's future. That $10 million satisfies the primary lenders. Conrad explained, his voice gaining speed. It buys us 6 months. 6 months to restructure. 6 months to save the empire. He looked at me expecting me to understand, expecting me to see the logic. She is just one girl, Luther. She is sweet, yes, but she is replaceable. The Remington legacy is not. I built this company from nothing. I will not let it fall because of a cash flow problem. He checked his gold watch. So you see, I don't have a choice, and neither do you. $10 million solves my problem. Your confession solves the legal problem. And Zoe, well, if she dies, she dies. If she lives with your confession, I still control the trust until the baby comes of age, because you will be legally incompetent. He smiled, a shark sensing blood in the water. You have 10 minutes to decide, Luther. Sign the paper, admit you are a senile old fool, and I will pay for the surgery. Or keep your pride and watch your daughter die from a hospital bed while you rot in here. He pulled a folded document and a pen from his inside pocket and slid them through the bars. They landed on the concrete floor with a soft slap. Tick-tock, Luther. Conrad turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing down the hall. He didn't look back. He was so confident, so arrogant in his power, that he didn't even consider the possibility that he had just handed me the weapon that would destroy him. He had given me the motive. He had given me the numbers. 45 million in debt, 10 million in insurance. I looked at the paper on the floor. Then I looked at the door where he had exited. He thought he had me cornered. He thought I was alone. But he had forgotten one thing. I wasn't just Luther the mechanic. I was Julius Grimes's brother. And in that cell, with the smell of the cigar smoke still hanging in the air, I realized I had one card left to play. A card Conrad Remington didn't even know existed in the deck. I didn't pick up the pen. I walked to the heavy steel door and started banging on it with my fist. "Hey!" I shouted. "Hey, Miller! Get down here!" I wasn't going to call a lawyer. I was going to make the one phone call that would bring the entire sky crashing down on the Remington Empire. It was time to call the Admiral. I banged on the steel door until my knuckles bled. The sound reverberated through the hollow corridor of the station, a steady, rhythmic thud that was impossible to ignore. I knew Sheriff Miller was likely in his office counting Conrad's money or planning his press conference, but eventually, a young deputy came to the viewing slot. He looked annoyed, holding a half-eaten sandwich. "Keep it down, old man," he sneered. "The sheriff said you wait for the judge. No special treatment." I stopped banging and slumped against the door, letting my shoulders drop. I made my voice sound small and broken, the voice of the senile grandfather they wanted me to be. "I am ready, son," I croaked. "I can't take this anymore. I want to sign the paper. Conrad left a confession. I just want to sign it and go to the hospital. Please. I need to make one call to my brother to bring my glasses. I can't read what I am signing without them." The deputy hesitated. He saw a broken old man ready to close their biggest case of the year. He probably saw a promotion in it for himself if he got the signature before morning. "All right," he muttered, unlocking the door. "One call, 3 minutes, and if you try anything funny, you go straight to solitary." He led me to the booking desk. The station was quiet, the night shift settling in with coffee and apathy. Sheriff Miller was nowhere to be seen. I picked up the heavy black receiver, my hands shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I didn't dial a local lawyer. I didn't dial a bail bondsman. I dialed a number I had memorized 30 years ago, a number that routed through a secure switchboard in Virginia. It rang once. "Grimes," a voice answered. It was deep, calm, and sounded like gravel grinding against steel. "It is Luther," I said, gripping the phone so tight the plastic creaked. There was a pause that carried the weight of decades of silence and understanding. We hadn't spoken in 6 months, not because we were estranged, but because men like us didn't need to fill the air with chatter. "Luther," the voice said, the tone shifting instantly from casual to alert. "Why are you calling me on an unsecured line at 2 in the morning?" "Conrad, Remington threw Zoe off his yacht," I said, my words coming out fast and low. "Hunter helped him. They tried to drown us both, Julius. She is in the ICU at St. Mary's. Critical condition." I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Then a sound I hadn't heard since we were boys, a low growl of pure predatory anger. "Is she alive?" Julius asked. "Barely," I replied. "They framed me, Julius. They paid off Sheriff Miller. I am in a holding cell charged with attempted murder. Conrad was just here. He offered to pay for her surgery if I plead insanity. He admitted everything. He owes $45 million, and he needs Zoe's life insurance to cover it. The silence on the line was absolute. It was the silence of a predator before the strike. "Did you sign anything?" Julius asked, his voice devoid of emotion. "No." "Good. Listen to me, Luther. Do not say another word to anyone. Not a lawyer, not a cop, not a priest," Julius the First whispered, looking at the deputy who was checking his watch. "They are going to kill her. If I don't sign, they let her die." "Activate the Omega Protocol," I said. The line went dead for a second. The Omega Protocol wasn't an official government term. It was a promise we made to each other when we buried our father. It meant total war. It meant using every resource, every favor, and every weapon at our disposal to protect the bloodline. Julius didn't ask for details. He didn't ask for proof. He just asked one question. "Who holds the debt on Remington's portfolio?" "First National," I said, remembering the letterhead I had seen in Hunter's trash months ago. "I own 12% of the holding company that underwrites First National," Julius said calmly. "I will freeze their assets before the sun comes up." "And Luther?" "Yeah. I am 20 minutes out. Sit tight. The cavalry isn't coming. I am." The line clicked off. I handed the receiver back to the deputy. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. "Did you get your glasses?" the deputy asked, bored. I looked him in the eye, and for the first time that night, I smiled. "Something like that, son. Something like that." I went back to my cell and sat on the cot. The fear was gone. In its place was a cold, hard certainty. They didn't know who Julius was. To the world, he was just a retired Coast Guard admiral, a man who gave speeches at Veterans Day parades. But I knew the truth. Julius Grimes was the man the Pentagon called when they had a problem that couldn't be solved on paper. He was currently a senior advisor on the National Security Council. He had the ear of the president and the personal cell phone number of the governor. But more than that, he was a man who had never lost a fight in his life. 20 minutes later, the atmosphere in the police station changed. It wasn't a noise, it was a pressure. The air grew heavy. The chatter at the front desk stopped abruptly. I stood up and walked to the bars. The heavy steel door at the end of the corridor opened. It didn't slam. It was opened with precision. Sheriff Miller walked in first, walking backward, his face pale and sweaty. He was stammering, his hands waving in the air. "Sir, you can't just walk back here. This is a restricted area. You need to clear this with the district attorney." Then Julius stepped into view. He was wearing a black trench coat over a dark suit that fit him like armor. He was 68 years old, but he moved with the power of a man half his age. His head was shaved, his beard trimmed to a razor-sharp line of gray. He didn't look like a visitor. He looked like an invasion force of one. He didn't look at Miller. He looked straight at me. His eyes were dark and hard, showing zero emotion, but I knew him. I saw the fire burning behind the ice. "Open it," Julius said, pointing a gloved finger at my cell door. "Now hold on a minute," Miller blustered, trying to regain some authority. "This man is a suspect in a double homicide attempt. He is dangerous. Who the hell do you think you are?" Julius reached into his coat pocket. The deputy behind Miller put his hand on his gun. It was the biggest mistake of his short career. Julius didn't pull a weapon. He pulled a small leather wallet and flipped it open. He held it an inch from Miller's face. "I am the man who authorizes your department's federal grant funding," Julius said, his voice low and terrifying. "I am also the man who is currently on the phone with Governor Sterling." He held up a sleek black phone. The screen was lit up. Governor Julius said into the phone, never taking his eyes off Miller. "I am at the precinct. Sheriff Miller is refusing to release a federal witness in an active domestic terrorism investigation." "Yes, sir. I will put him on." Julius shoved the phone against Miller's ear. Miller flinched, as if the phone were hot. "Yes, Governor," Miller stammered. "Yes, sir. No, sir, I didn't know. Federal witness. Yes, sir. Immediately, sir." Miller pulled the phone away, his hand trembling. He looked at Julius with pure fear. "I didn't know," he whispered. "Conrad said he was just a mechanic." "Conrad Remington lied to you," Julius said, taking his phone back. "And you were stupid enough to believe him. Open the door." Miller fumbled with his keys. He dropped them, once picked them up with shaking fingers and unlocked the cell. The metal clang of the door opening was the sound of freedom. I stepped out. I smelled like ocean water and sweat, but I stood tall. Julius looked me up and down, assessing my injuries with a practiced eye. "Can you walk?" he asked. I nodded. "I need to get to Zoe." "We are going," Julius said. "I have a team at the hospital already." He turned to Miller, who was shrinking against the wall. "Sheriff Julius," said his voice deceptively polite, "you are going to lose those keys. And then you are going to lose your badge. But right now, you are going to give me the incident report, the witness statements from the yacht crew, and the surveillance footage from the marina." "But that is evidence," Miller squeaked. "It is now classified material," Julius corrected. "Hand it over, or I will have the FBI raid this building in 10 minutes, and they will find every dirty dime Conrad Remington ever paid you." Miller ran to his office. Julius put a hand on my shoulder. It was a heavy, grounding weight. "You look like hell, Luther," he said softly. "You should see the other guy," I replied. We walked out of the station into the cool night air. A black SUV was waiting at the curb, engine running. Two men in dark suits stood by the doors, looking like they chewed glass for breakfast. "Get in," Julius said, opening the door. "We have work to do." As the SUV pulled away, speeding toward the hospital, I looked at my brother. "He owns the bank?" I asked. Julius lit a cigarette, the flame illuminating his hard face. "The holding company," Julius said. "I bought a controlling interest 10 years ago when the market crashed. Remington is leveraged to the hilt, Luther. He doesn't own those towers. I do." He exhaled a stream of smoke. "And by the time the sun comes up, he isn't going to own the shirt on his back. Now tell me everything." I leaned back against the leather seat and began to talk. I told him about the insurance policy, the gambling debts, the fake smile Hunter gave my daughter before he threw her into the dark. And as I spoke, I watched my brother's face turn into stone. The Remington family had made a fatal error. They thought they were the predators in this ocean. They were about to find out they were just bait. St. Mary's Hospital looked less like a place of healing and more like a fortress under siege. The main entrance was awash in the blue and red strobe of emergency lights, mixed with the harsh white glare of television news crews. Satellite trucks idled on the curb, and reporters jockeyed for position, their microphones extended like spears. At the center of this circus, standing on the hospital steps, was Hunter. He had changed his clothes since the marina. He was now wearing a wrinkled button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, looking disheveled and exhausted. It was a costume designed to scream grieving husband. Flanking him were 4 men in dark suits. They weren't police, and they weren't hospital security. They were private contractors, the kind Conrad Remington hired to intimidate union leaders or silence whistleblowers. They stood with their arms crossed, blocking the automatic doors, forming a human wall between the world and my daughter. I stepped out of Julius's SUV, and the noise hit me instantly. Hunter was speaking to a reporter from a local station, his voice breaking at perfectly calculated intervals. "We are just praying for a miracle," Hunter sobbed, wiping a dry eye. "Zoe is fighting for her life, and the baby, God help us. We don't know if the baby made it. It is hard to believe that our own father could do something so evil. He has been unstable for years, but we never thought he would try to kill them." I felt a hand on my arm. It was Julius. "Stay close," he said. "Do not stop walking." We moved toward the steps. I saw the private guards tense up. One of them tapped Hunter on the shoulder and pointed at us. Hunter looked up. The sorrow vanished from his face, replaced instantly by a flash of panic that he quickly masked with rage. He stepped toward the microphones, pointing a trembling finger at me. The cameras swung around, blinding me with their lights. "There he is!" Hunter shouted, his voice rising to a theatrical scream. "That is him. That is the man who threw my wife into the ocean. Get him away from here. He has come to finish the job." The effect was instantaneous. The crowd of onlookers, patients, families, and curious bystanders turned toward me. I saw disgust in their eyes. I saw hatred. To them, I wasn't a desperate father trying to see his dying child. I was a monster, a senile, violent relic who had tried to drown a pregnant woman. "You make me sick," someone yelled from the back of the crowd. "Murderer," another voice screamed. A woman with a purse swung it at me as I passed, missing my face by inches. "Why aren't you in jail?" she shrieked. Hunter fed off their energy. He stepped down one stair, getting closer to the crowd, inciting them. "He is dangerous," Hunter yelled. "He belongs in a cage. Don't let him near my wife. Someone stop him." The crowd surged forward. It wasn't just shouting anymore. People were pushing, shoving, trying to get a hand on me. I felt a fist strike my shoulder. Someone grabbed my jacket, trying to pull me down. The police officers present were hanging back, unsure of what to do, caught between the mob and the narrative Hunter had spun. I looked at Hunter. He was smiling, a tiny, triumphant smirk hidden behind his hand. He wanted this. He wanted a riot. If I was beaten by a mob, it would solve all his problems. It would be street justice. I braced myself, ready to fight, ready to go down swinging. I wasn't going to let them stop me. I had to see Zoe. "Back off," I roared, shoving a man who lunged at me. "Get out of my way." But there were too many of them. The wall of bodies was closing in. I felt trapped, suffocating under the weight of their misplaced anger. Then the air changed. It wasn't a sound, it was a vibration, a low hum that seemed to come from everywhere at once. 4 black SUVs screeched to a halt at the curb, boxing in the news vans. The doors flew open in unison. 12 men stepped out. They didn't look like the private security thugs guarding the door. These men moved differently. They moved with a fluid, predatory grace. They wore plain gray suits with no ties and earpieces. They didn't shout. They didn't shove. They simply advanced. Julius didn't even look back. He just kept walking, his eyes locked on the hospital doors. "Clear the lane," a voice said over the chaos. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise like a knife. The 12 men formed a wedge formation around Julius and me. They moved through the crowd not with violence, but with an unstoppable pressure. They deflected reaching hands with precise, minimal movements. They stepped into spaces, forcing people back without ever throwing a punch. It was like watching water part around the prow of a battleship. The mob, confused by this sudden display of disciplined force, faltered. The shouting died down, replaced by nervous murmurs. Hunter's smile vanished. He looked at the approaching phalanx and took a step back, retreating up the stairs toward his hired goons. "Stop them," Hunter screeched at his guards. "Don't let them in. They are armed." His guards looked at the men approaching. They looked at the way Julius's team moved, the way they scanned the perimeter, the way their hands hovered near their waists. These were ex-Special Forces operators, men who had cleared rooms in war zones. Conrad's thugs were bar bouncers in expensive suits. They did the math. As we reached the top of the stairs, the 4 guards stepped aside. They didn't say a word. They just opened a path, abandoning Hunter to his fate. Hunter was left standing alone at the top of the stairs. The cameras were still rolling. The microphones were still recording. He looked from his retreating guards to me, terror dawning in his eyes. "You can't go in there," Hunter stammered, trying to block the door with his own body. "It is family only. I am her husband. I say who gets in." Julius stopped 3 feet from him. He looked at Hunter with the same expression one might look at a stain on a carpet. "Move," Julius said. "Make me," Hunter spat, trying to regain his bravado for the cameras. "You are trespassing. I will sue you for everything you have." Julius signaled to the man on his right. The operator stepped forward, grabbed Hunter by the lapels of his wrinkled shirt, and lifted him off the ground. He moved him to the side as easily as moving a mannequin, and pinned him against the brick wall of the hospital entrance. Hunter's feet dangled inches from the ground. He gasped, his eyes bulging. I stepped forward. I was face to face with him now. I could smell the stale coffee and fear on his breath. The cameras were zooming in, capturing every second of this confrontation. I leaned in close, so close that my nose almost touched his. I lowered my voice to a whisper that only he could hear, a whisper meant for him, not the audience. "You think you are clever, Hunter," I rasped. "You think you framed me." Hunter glared at me, defiant, even now. "You are finished, old man. Nobody believes you." I smiled. It was a cold, hard smile. "I know about the $85,000, Hunter." His eyes widened, his breath hitched. "I know about the gambling debt to the Russians in Atlantic City," I continued. "I know because I paid it, last month. When you came to me crying, saying they were going to break your legs, I paid it to protect Zoe." Hunter went pale. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. And guess what I whispered? I kept the receipt. I have the wire transfer record. I have the texts you sent me begging for help. I stepped back, smoothing my jacket. "I tried to save you, son," I said loud enough for the nearest reporter to hear. "But I am done saving you." The operator released him. Hunter slid down the wall, his legs giving out. He looked at me with absolute horror. He realized in that moment that I wasn't just a victim. I was the keeper of his secrets, and I had just started spilling them. Julius pushed the automatic doors open. We walked into the cool, sterile air of the hospital lobby, leaving Hunter slumped against the wall, the cameras now turning on him, devouring his silence. "We are going to the ICU," Julius said, not breaking stride. I followed him, my heart pounding, not with fear anymore, but with the grim satisfaction of the first blow landed. The siege was broken. Now it was time to find the truth. The only sound in the intensive care unit was the rhythmic beeping of the cardiac monitor, a sound that marked the seconds my daughter was still alive. I sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair by her bed, watching her chest rise and fall. She looked so small amidst the tangle of tubes and wires. Her skin was the color of parchment, and her left arm was encased in a heavy cast, suspended in a sling. Zoe stirred, her eyelids fluttering open. For a moment, there was no recognition, just a hazy confusion brought on by the heavy sedation. Then her eyes found mine. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice cracked and dry. "The baby. Is the baby okay?" "He is fighting, honey," I said, leaning in to stroke her hair. "The doctors performed an emergency C-section. He is in the NICU. He is small, but he has your lungs." He is screaming at the nurses already. Tears welled in her eyes. Relief washed over her face, but it was quickly replaced by a shadow of anxiety. She tried to sit up, wincing as the pain from her incision hit her. "Where is Hunter?" she asked. "Is he okay?" I remember falling. Did he fall too? I froze. I stared at my daughter, the woman who had just been thrown off a yacht by her husband, and she was asking if he was okay. The level of manipulation she had been subjected to was terrifying. It wasn't just love, it was brainwashing. "Zoe," I said carefully, my voice tight. "Hunter didn't fall. He pushed you." "No," she said immediately, shaking her head against the pillow. "No, Daddy, you are confused. It was dark. The boat lurched. He was trying to hold me. He must have slipped. His hands were wet from his drink. I saw his face. He looked scared. He looked scared because he thought he might miss," I said, the anger rising in my throat like bile. "He and his father picked you up and threw you over the rail. I watched them do it." Zoe closed her eyes, tears leaking out. "You never liked him. You always thought he was arrogant." "But he loves me, Daddy. He is just under a lot of stress with the business. He would never hurt our son. It was an accident. Please tell me you didn't say anything to the police. He could get in trouble." My heart broke. It shattered right there in that sterile room. This was the hardest part of being a father. Watching your child walk into a fire and knowing you can't pull them out with just words. She was defending the man who tried to murder her. She was rationalizing her own execution because the alternative that her entire marriage was a lie was too painful to accept. I looked at her, at the bruises on her neck where he had grabbed her, at the cast on her arm. I realized then that saving her life in the ocean wasn't enough. I had to save her mind. I had to break her heart to save her soul. I stood up and walked to the small table where Julius had left the manila folder. It was thick, heavy with the weight of Hunter's sins. "I didn't want to do this, Zoe," I said, my back to her. "I wanted you to have your dream. I wanted to be wrong about him. I prayed every night that I was just a jealous old man who didn't understand the modern world." I turned around and threw the folder onto the bed. It landed on her legs with a heavy thud, but I wasn't wrong. Zoe looked at the folder, then at me. "What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It is the truth," I said. "Open it." She hesitated, her hand hovering over the cover. "Open it, Zoe," I commanded, my voice leaving no room for argument. She flipped it open. The first page was a bank document. "That is a second mortgage on your house in Pinecrest," I said, pointing at the paper. "Taken out 6 months ago. Signature, Zoe Remington." "I never signed that," she whispered, frowning. "The house is paid off. Grandma left it to me, free and clear." "You didn't sign it," I said. "Hunter did. He forged your signature. He took out $500,000 in equity." Zoe flipped the page. Her breath hitched. "Those are credit card statements," I continued, reciting the numbers I had memorized in the car with Julius, 8 of them, all opened in your maiden name so you wouldn't see the alerts on your joint account. She started reading the charges: luxury hotels in Vegas, jewelry stores, online gambling sites, cash advances. $120,000, Zoe, I said, my voice hard and relentless. He maxed them all out. He didn't use that money for the business. He used it for poker. He used it for strippers. He used it to buy that watch he told you was a gift from his father. No, she whimpered. This can't be real. He told me the business was expanding. He said we were investing. He was investing in his own addiction. I snapped. Look at the next page. She turned the page. It was a foreclosure notice. They haven't paid the mortgage in 4 months, I said. The bank is seizing your house in 30 days. You are homeless, Zoe. You just didn't know it yet. That is why they needed you to sign over the trust. They didn't need liquidity. They needed a miracle to stay out of jail. Zoe was shaking now, the papers rattling in her hands. The denial was cracking. The wall she had built around her perfect husband was crumbling, brick by brick. But there was still one piece left, one illusion she was clinging to. But the yacht, she said, looking up at me with desperate eyes. The Gilded Lady. Conrad owns it. They have money, Daddy. You can't fake a yacht like that. They are just having a cash flow problem, like he said. I walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot where Hunter was still playing the victim for the cameras. The Gilded Lady doesn't belong to Conrad Remington, I said quietly. Zoe frowned, confusion warring with the pain on her face. What do you mean? We have been on it all week. It has the family crest on the towels. It belongs to a holding company called Vance Marine Technologies, I said, turning to face her. Zoe stared at me. Vance Marine. That is the company you consulted for, the one you retired from. I didn't just consult for them, Zoe. I founded it. I own it. The silence in the room was absolute. The beeping of the monitor seemed to speed up, matching her rising heart rate. I invented a gyroscopic stabilizer for deep-sea oil rigs 20 years ago, I explained. It is used on almost every platform in the North Sea. I made a lot of money, Zoe. A lot. But I kept it quiet. I put it in trusts. I invested it. I bought assets through shell companies because I wanted a simple life. I wanted you to grow up normal, not like those trust fund kids who end up ruined by money. I walked back to the bed and placed my hand on the folder. Conrad Remington was broke 5 years ago. He needed a yacht to keep up appearances to fool his investors. He leased the Gilded Lady from Vance Marine. He pays $20,000 a month to rent it, and for the last 3 months, he hasn't paid a dime. I looked deep into her eyes. He is renting my boat, Zoe. He is throwing you off my boat. Hunter is nothing but a tenant who is behind on his rent. He is a leech. He has never owned anything in his life except the lies he sold you. Zoe looked down at the papers scattered on the bed, the mortgage, the credit cards, the foreclosure notice, and finally, the truth about the yacht. The symbol of the Remington wealth was just another lie, another rental, another facade. She picked up a photo from the file. It was a surveillance picture Julius's team had pulled. It showed Hunter at a casino table, laughing with a drink in his hand, his arm around a woman who definitely wasn't Zoe. The timestamp was 2 days before our trip, 2 days before he tried to kill her. The dam broke. It wasn't a silent cry this time. It was a guttural scream of pure agony. It was the sound of a woman realizing that the man she slept next to, the man she created a life with, was a monster. She curled forward, clutching her chest as if her heart was physically ripping apart. She sobbed so hard the monitors started alarming. Nurses rushed in, but I held up a hand, stopping them. She needed to let it out. She needed to purge the poison. He never loved me, she choked out between sobs. He never loved me. It was all a calculation. I was just a bank account to him. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled her into my arms. She buried her face in my shoulder, her tears soaking my shirt, just like the ocean water had hours ago. He tried to kill our son, she screamed, her voice turning from sorrow to a terrifying rage. He threw us away like garbage. I held her tight, rocking her back and forth. Yes, baby, I whispered. He did. She pulled back, her eyes red and swollen, but burning with a fire I had never seen before. It was the Grimes fire. It was the same look Julius had before he destroyed someone. I want him dead, Daddy, she hissed. I want him to suffer. I want him to lose everything. I wiped a tear from her cheek. He will, I promised. Julius is already working on the bank accounts. I have the evidence of the debts. But we need to finish him publicly. We need to make sure he can never hurt anyone again. Zoe looked at the folder again. She picked up the paper with the mortgage fraud. She gripped it so hard it crinkled. "Get me a lawyer," she said, her voice cold and steady. "Not a divorce lawyer, a prosecutor. I want to press charges. I want to testify." I nodded, standing up. "You will. But first we have a party to crash." "What party?" she asked, wiping her face. "The gala," I said. "They are hosting it on the yacht tonight. They think we are dead or in jail. They are going to use your death to launch a charity fund to steal more money." Zoe looked at her broken arm, then at her reflection in the dark window. She didn't look like a victim anymore. She looked like a weapon. "Get me a wheelchair," she said, "and get me my son. We are going to that gala." I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled genuinely since I hit the water. "That is my girl," I said. Hunter Remington had thrown a pregnant girl off his boat. He thought he had disposed of a problem. He was about to find out that he hadn't drowned his wife. He had baptized her. And she was rising from the water, not as a victim, but as the storm that would sink him. The television in the hospital waiting room was mounted high on the wall, broadcasting the lie that was currently destroying my life. I stood there, arms crossed, watching Conrad Remington perform the greatest acting role of his career. He was standing at a podium adorned with the Remington Corporation seal, microphones from every major news network thrust in his face. He looked tired, shattered, even, wearing a dark suit that whispered of mourning without screaming it. Beside him stood a doctor I didn't recognize, a man in a white coat, holding a clipboard like a shield. "Ladies and gentlemen," Conrad said, his voice trembling just enough to sound authentic. "It is with a heavy heart that I address the rumors circulating about the tragedy on my yacht. We have tried to protect our family's privacy, but the vicious accusations made by Luther Grimes have forced our hand." He gestured to the doctor, who stepped forward and adjusted his glasses. "I am Dr. Aris," Conrad continued. "I have been treating Mr. Grimes for the past 2 years. It is my professional and unfortunate duty to confirm that Luther suffers from advanced vascular dementia. His cognitive decline has been rapid. He suffers from paranoid delusions, violent outbursts, and a complete detachment from reality." I watched the screen, my jaw tightening until my teeth ached. I had never seen this doctor in my life. I had never been treated for anything other than high blood pressure and a bad knee. But there it was, a medical file projected onto the screen behind them, showing brain scans that weren't mine, and dates of appointments I had never attended. And my daughter-in-law, Zoe Conrad, said, wiping a tear from his eye, "We loved her like our own, but she has struggled with severe prenatal depression for months. We tried to get her help. We tried to keep her safe. But on the boat that night, she was in a dark place. When Luther tried to grab her in his confusion, she slipped. It was an accident born of tragedy and mental illness." The reporters were eating it up, scribbling furiously, nodding in sympathy. The narrative was perfect. The grieving billionaire patriarch trying to hold his shattered family together, while the crazy old mechanic tried to destroy them. I looked around the waiting room. A nurse was watching the TV, shaking her head. "That poor man," she whispered, looking at Conrad. "Imagine having to deal with a crazy father-in-law on top of losing your son's wife." She didn't know I was standing right there. She didn't know the monster she was pitying had just signed my death warrant in the court of public opinion. My phone started buzzing in my pocket. It was a notification from a news app. The headline read, "Senile grandfather blames grieving billionaire for tragic accident." The world had turned against me in the span of 10 minutes. Conrad had weaponized my age. He had weaponized my silence. He had turned me into a villain so easily that I almost admired the efficiency of it. Julius was standing next to me, his eyes fixed on the screen. He wasn't looking at Conrad. He was looking at the ticker tape at the bottom of the screen that showed the Remington stock price holding steady despite the scandal. "I am going to kill the feed," Julius said, his voice a low rumble. "I can have the station shut down in 5 minutes. I will go on air. I will show them your Navy service records. I will show them your engineering patents. We can debunk this dementia garbage in an hour." I reached out and put a hand on his arm, stopping him. "No," I said. Julius looked at me, his brow furrowed. "Luther, he is destroying you. He is painting you as a lunatic. If we don't counter this now, The narrative sets like concrete. We need to fight back. Let him talk, I said, keeping my eyes on Conrad's fake tears. Let him feel safe. Let him think he has won. But why, Julius asked, the frustration leaking into his voice. We have the truth. Because if we speak now, it is just a he said, she said argument, I explained. It is a messy public brawl. And people love a brawl, but they don't change their minds. I don't want to argue with him, Julius. I want to execute him. I looked at my brother. If he thinks I am crazy, he will get careless. If he thinks he has won, he will start spending that insurance money before he has it. He will lower his guard. I turned away from the TV. Let them climb high, Julius. Let them climb so high they can't see the ground. Because the higher they are, the harder they hit when I cut the ladder. Julius stared at me for a long moment. Then a slow, cold smile spread across his face. You always were the patient one, he said. I would have just sent a drone strike. That comes later, I said. Right now we use the banks. Activate the freeze. Not everything at once, just enough to make them sweat. Start with Hunter. Julius pulled out his phone and tapped the screen 3 times. Done, he said. I looked back at the TV where Conrad was now hugging the fake doctor, thanking him for his bravery. Enjoy the spotlight, Conrad, I whispered. It is the last time you are going to shine. The next day, Hunter Remington walked into Le Jardin, the most exclusive French restaurant in the city. He was wearing a tailored navy suit that cost $3,000 and sunglasses indoors. On his arm was Tiffany, the daughter of one of Conrad's biggest rivals. She was young, beautiful, and completely oblivious to the fact that she was just a pawn in Hunter's game. He was using her to secure a merger. He was using her to show the world he was moving on. He was using her because he needed someone to pay attention to him, while his wife lay in a hospital bed recovering from the injuries he gave her. They sat at the best table by the window, the one reserved for VIPs. Hunter ordered a bottle of vintage champagne without even looking at the price list. He ordered the caviar service. He ordered the Wagyu beef. He was celebrating. In his mind, he had won. His father had fixed the legal mess. The public believed his story. The insurance money was practically in his pocket. I watched from a parked car across the street, listening to the audio feed from the bug Julius's team had planted in Hunter's phone. The clarity was crystal perfect. You are so brave, Hunter, Tiffany cooed, her voice dripping with sympathy. I can't believe what that awful old man did to your wife. It must be so hard for you. It is a nightmare, babe. Hunter sighed, sounding rightfully weary. But we have to be strong. Zoe would want me to be happy. She wouldn't want me to stop living. That is why I am glad I found you. You understand me. He reached across the table and took her hand. I nearly vomited in the car. He was talking about my daughter as if she were already dead, as if she were a fond memory, instead of a living, breathing woman he had tried to murder 48 hours ago. The lunch went on for 2 hours. Hunter drank most of the champagne, laughing a little too loudly, making promises he couldn't keep. He told her he was going to buy a villa in Tuscany. He told her he was going to buy her a diamond necklace to match her eyes. Then the bill came, $1,250. Hunter didn't even glance at it. He pulled out his black Amex, the heavy metal card that was supposed to signal unlimited wealth, and tossed it onto the silver tray with a casual flick of his wrist. Put a 20% tip on it, he told the waiter, winking at Tiffany. The waiter bowed and walked away. Hunter leaned back, sipping the last of the wine, smiling at Tiffany. So about that weekend in Aspen, he said, I was thinking we take the private jet. No TSA, no lines, just us and the altitude. Tiffany giggled. You are amazing, Hunter. The waiter returned. He wasn't bowing this time. He looked uncomfortable holding the black card with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. Sir, the waiter said quietly, leaning down so only Hunter could hear. I am afraid the card was declined. Hunter froze. He laughed a short, nervous sound. Don't be ridiculous, he said loud enough for the next table to hear. That is a Centurion card. Run it again. We ran it 3 times, sir, the waiter said, his voice dropping an octave. The bank has put a hold on the account. Code 42. Code 42. It meant suspected fraud. It meant total asset freeze. Hunter's face flushed a deep, ugly red. He snatched the card back. Stupid bank, he muttered. They probably flagged it because of the large transaction I made this morning. Fraud protection, you know. Overzealous. He pulled out another card, a platinum Visa. Use this one, he said, snapping it onto the tray. And bring me another espresso. The waiter took it. He was back in 2 minutes. Declined, sir. Hunter stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. The restaurant went silent. People were staring. This wasn't just an embarrassment. In Hunter's world, this was a social death sentence. There is something wrong with your machine, Hunter shouted, his voice cracking. Do you know who I am? I am Hunter Remington. I could buy this restaurant and turn it into a parking lot. Sir, please lower your voice. The maitre d' stepped in, his face stern. We need another form of payment. Now. Hunter fumbled for his wallet, pulling out every card he had. The corporate card, the debit card, the gas card. Declined, declined, declined. I listened to the feed, a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. Julius hadn't just frozen the accounts. He had blacklisted Hunter's social security number across the entire banking network. He couldn't even buy a stick of gum. Tiffany was looking at him with wide, horrified eyes. She wasn't looking at a powerful billionaire anymore. She was looking at a man who couldn't pay for his lunch. Hunter, I don't understand, she whispered, shrinking back into her seat. It is a mistake, Hunter stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. My dad, I need to call my dad. He handles the accounts. He pulled out his phone and dialed Conrad. I listened on the feed. Ring, ring, ring. Please pick up, Dad, Hunter hissed. Please. Voicemail. He dialed again. Voicemail. Conrad's accounts were frozen too. He was likely screaming at a bank manager right now, realizing that his $45 million debt had just been called in immediately. He didn't have time for his son's lunch bill. Hunter looked at Tiffany. He looked at the waiter who was now flanked by 2 large security guards. The illusion of power evaporated, leaving only a scared, broke boy in a suit he couldn't afford. Babe, Hunter said, his voice trembling. Do you have your card? I will pay you back cash as soon as we leave. I promise. It is just a glitch. Tiffany looked at him. She looked at the bill. Then she looked around the restaurant at the people whispering and pointing. The spell broke. You want me to pay? She asked, her voice icy. You invited me. You ordered the caviar. Please, Hunter begged. Just this once. Tiffany stood up, picking up her purse. She didn't reach for her wallet. She reached for her dignity. I think I will take an Uber, she said, loud and clear. Don't call me Hunter. She walked out, leaving him standing there alone. Sir, the maitre d' said, crossing his arms. The bill. Hunter slumped into his chair, putting his head in his hands. I can't pay, he whispered. Good, the maitre d' said. Security, take him to the back office. We are calling the police. I took the headphones off. I sat in the car for a moment, watching the police cruiser pull up to the restaurant entrance. I watched them lead Hunter out in handcuffs, not for murder this time, but for theft of services. It was petty, it was small, but it was the first crack in the glass. He was humiliated, he was broke, and he was alone. I started the engine of my old truck. That was lunch, I said to the empty car. Now let us see what is for dinner. I drove back to the hospital. Zoe was waiting, and we had a lot of work to do before the gala. The silent war was over. The loud one was about to begin. Tiffany Sterling was sitting at a corner table in the Velvet Bean, a cafe where a cup of coffee cost more than a tank of gas. She was scrolling through her phone, sipping an oat milk latte and looking bored. She was beautiful in that polished, expensive way that old money buys. But there was a hardness in her eyes, a calculation that reminded me of Hunter. She was wearing sunglasses indoors and a white silk scarf that probably cost $2,000. I walked in wearing my faded mechanic's coveralls and a baseball cap pulled low. The hostess started to intercept me, her nose wrinkling in distaste. But I moved past her with the momentum of a man who belonged anywhere he chose to be. I didn't look at the other patrons who stared at my oil-stained boots on the marble floor. I only had eyes for the girl who thought she was going to be the next Mrs. Remington. I pulled out the chair opposite Tiffany and sat down. She looked up, startled, dropping her phone onto the table. Her eyes widened behind her dark glasses. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "You can't sit here. This is a private table." I didn't move. I placed a heavy manila envelope on the white tablecloth between us. It landed with a dull thud, rattling her delicate china cup. "You are Tiffany," I said, my voice gravelly and low. "The girl Hunter is sleeping with while his wife is in the hospital fighting for her life." Tiffany stiffened. She looked around nervously, checking to see if anyone was watching. "Who are you?" she hissed. "If you are a reporter, I will have you thrown out. Hunter told me about vultures like you." "I am not a reporter," I said, leaning in close. "I am the man Hunter tried to drown. I am Zoe's father." Her mouth opened in a perfect O of shock. She took off her sunglasses, revealing eyes that were wide with fear. "You," she whispered. "You are supposed to be crazy. Hunter said you were locked up in a psych ward." "Hunter lies," I said calmly. "He lies about everything. About his money, about his wife, and especially about you." I tapped the envelope with a grease-stained finger. "Open it, Tiffany, unless you want to be the accessory to a murder investigation when the feds kick down his door." She hesitated, her manicured hand hovering over the clasp. Curiosity warred with fear. Curiosity won. She opened the envelope and pulled out the first document. It was a copy of the $10 million life insurance policy on Zoe. "What is this?" she asked, frowning. "That is the reason Hunter hasn't left Zoe for you," I explained. "It is a key person insurance policy. It pays out $10 million to the Remington Corporation if Zoe dies." I watched her read the numbers. I watched the gears in her head turning. "He told you he couldn't divorce her yet because of the baby, didn't he?" I asked. "He told you it was complicated, that he didn't want to look like the bad guy." Tiffany looked up, her face pale. "He said he was waiting for the right time. He said he loved me. He said Zoe was unstable, and he was trapped." I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "He is trapped all right, but not by Zoe. He is trapped by $45 million in debt." I pulled out the second document, the foreclosure notice on the Remington estate, the bank seizure letters, the list of gambling debts to the Russian mob. "He is broke, Tiffany," I said brutally. "He doesn't have a dime. The yacht is rented, the cars are leased, the watch he wears is fake. He needs Zoe dead to pay off the sharks." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "You think you are the love of his life. You think you are the prize. But you are just a distraction, a free toy to keep him entertained while he waits for the payout." "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, he bought me a bracelet. He took me to Paris. He paid for Paris with a credit card he opened in Zoe's name," I countered. "And that bracelet. I bet if you get it appraised you will find out it is cubic zirconia." Tears welled in her eyes. Not tears of sadness, but tears of humiliation. The worst kind of pain for a girl like Tiffany. "He is using you," I said, driving the final nail in. "Once he gets that $10 million, do you think he is going to marry you? Or do you think he is going to find some other girl with a better pedigree and less baggage? You are just the side piece, Tiffany, and when the money comes in, you will be the first loose end he cuts." Tiffany stared at the papers scattered on the table. The proof of his bankruptcy, the proof of his lies, the proof that her entire relationship was a fraud. Her face hardened. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold fury that I recognized instantly. It was the rage of a woman scorned. She picked up her phone. Her hands were shaking, but her grip was tight. "He called me," she said, her voice icy, "the night of the accident. He called me from the marina while he was waiting for the police." My heart skipped a beat. "You talked to him?" She nodded slowly. "He was drunk, or high on adrenaline. He was bragging. He told me everything was going to be fine. He said he had solved the problem." "Did you record it?" I asked, holding my breath. Tiffany looked at me and a cruel smile touched her lips. "I record everything she said. In my world, information is currency. Hunter likes to talk. He likes to feel big. He forgets that I am not just a pretty face." She tapped her screen, opening a hidden folder. She scrolled past dozens of files until she found one dated 3 nights ago. She pressed play. Hunter's voice filled the small space between us, clear and arrogant, cutting through the cafe's ambient jazz. "Babe, you won't believe it. It is done. The bitch is gone." I heard Tiffany's voice on the recording, sounding sleepy. "Hunter, what happened?" "I pushed her," Hunter said, followed by a manic laugh. "Me and Dad, We tossed her right over. Splash. Just like garbage. She screamed, but nobody heard. It is over, Tiff. The insurance money is as good as ours. I am going to be rich again. And I am going to marry you, and we are going to live like kings. No more debt. No more nagging black wife. Just us and $10 million. The recording ended. The silence at the table was heavy. Tiffany looked at me, her eyes blazing. He called me a toy, she whispered. He called me a distraction. He called you an accessory to murder, I corrected her. If the police find that recording on your phone and you haven't turned it over, you go to jail too. Tiffany didn't hesitate. She hit a button on her screen. Airdrop, she said, holding her phone out to me. I accepted the file. The little progress bar filled up, turning blue. I had it. The confession, the smoking gun, the nail in his coffin. I stood up, sliding the envelope of documents back into my pocket. You did the right thing, Tiffany, I said. She looked at me, her face a mask of cold porcelain. I didn't do it for you, she said. And I didn't do it for Zoe. I did it because nobody plays me. Nobody. I nodded, respecting her honesty. Keep your head down, I advised. When this blows up, and it will blow up tonight, you don't want to be anywhere near him. Tiffany put her sunglasses back on, hiding her eyes. I am going to the Hamptons, she said, picking up her latte. As far as anyone knows, I broke up with him weeks ago. She took a sip of her coffee, leaving a perfect red lipstick stain on the rim. Destroy him, Luther, she said. Burn him to the ground. I tipped my cap to her. Consider it done. I walked out of the cafe, the digital file burning a hole in my pocket. I had the money trail. I had the motive. And now, I had the confession. Hunter Remington thought he had silenced us in the ocean. He thought he had buried his secrets. But he forgot one thing. The ocean always gives back what you throw in, and tonight it was giving him a tidal wave. I climbed into my truck and dialed Julius. I have it, I said. Is it good? Julius asked. It is better than good, I replied, starting the engine. It is a death sentence. Get to the marina, Julius said. The guests are arriving. The Gilded Lady is waiting. I pulled out into traffic, a smile stretching across my face. I am on my way, I said. The silent war was over. It was time to make some noise. Sheriff Miller was a man who thought he was the king of his little county. He walked with the swagger of someone who knew the law didn't apply to him because he was the one writing the tickets. But he forgot that, in the grand scheme of things, a county sheriff is nothing compared to the federal government. And he definitely forgot that before he was a sheriff, he was just a corrupt deputy that my brother Julius had kept an eye on for 15 years. It was 2 a.m. when Julius's surveillance team flagged a dispatch call. Miller wasn't at the station. He was at the marina. He wasn't there to investigate a crime scene. He was there to sanitize it. Conrad Remington had given the order. The yacht, the Gilded Lady, was to be scrubbed clean before the sun came up. Every fingerprint, every scuff mark from the struggle, and especially any trace of my daughter's blood on the railing, had to disappear. I was sitting in the passenger seat of Julius's SUV, watching the live feed from a long-range camera positioned on the dock. I saw Miller walking up the gangway of my boat. He wasn't carrying a crime scene kit. He was carrying a bucket of industrial bleach and a heavy-duty scrub brush. Behind him, 2 of his deputies carried heavy trash bags, ready to strip the deck of any evidence that could send Hunter and Conrad to prison. He is destroying the crime scene, I growled, my hand gripping the door handle so hard the leather creaked. He is erasing them, Julius. If he bleaches that deck, we lose the physical evidence. Julius didn't look at the screen. He was calmly checking the magazine of his sidearm. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. He is not going to scrub anything, Luther Julius said, his voice smooth and cold like a glacier sliding into the sea. He is making a mistake. He thinks he is working for the highest bidder. He doesn't realize the auction ended 10 years ago. Julius put the car in gear. We didn't turn on the sirens. We didn't flash the lights. We rolled into the marina like a shadow. We parked right at the base of the gangway, blocking Miller's exit. I got out first. I wanted him to see me. I wanted him to see the man he had locked in a cage, the man he had laughed at. Miller was halfway down the deck, the bleach bottle in his hand. He froze when he saw me standing under the dock lights. For a second he looked confused. Then he looked angry. "You aren't supposed to be here, Grimes," he shouted, his hand dropping to his holster. "You are out on bail, but that doesn't mean you can interfere with a police investigation. Get off my crime scene." "Investigation," I shouted back, my voice echoing off the water. "Is that what you call it? You are holding a bottle of bleach, Miller. You aren't investigating a damn thing. You are mopping up Conrad's mess." Miller sneered and started to unscrew the cap of the bleach. "I don't know what you were talking about. We are just cleaning up a biohazard. Now leave before I arrest you for obstruction." That is when Julius stepped out of the shadows. He walked up the gangway, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. He didn't say a word until he was standing 3 feet from Miller. He looked at the bleach. He looked at the deputies who were suddenly looking very nervous. Then he looked Miller dead in the eye. "Put the bottle down," Sheriff Julius said. Miller hesitated. He was a bully, and bullies don't like being told what to do, especially by men who look like they can snap them in half. "This is my jurisdiction," Miller spat. "You have no authority here, Admiral. You are retired. Go write a memoir." Julius reached into his jacket pocket, the deputies' tensed hands hovering over their weapons. But Julius didn't pull a gun. He pulled a thick manila envelope sealed with red wax. He held it out to Miller. "I am not retired," Julius said softly. "I am just strategic. Open it." Miller looked at the envelope, then at Julius. His arrogance was starting to crack, letting a little bit of fear seep through. He took the envelope, his hands wet with sweat. He tore it open. He pulled out a single photograph. It was a high-resolution surveillance photo taken from a distance, but clear as day. It showed a younger Miller in uniform, standing behind the old Blue Marlin warehouse. He was shaking hands with Conrad Remington. Conrad was handing him a thick stack of cash bound in rubber bands. Miller's face went gray. He looked like he was going to be sick. "May 12th, 5 years ago," Julius recited from memory. "You were running for sheriff. You were behind in the polls. You needed money for ads. Conrad gave you $50,000 in unreported cash, illegal campaign contributions, bribery of a public official, tax evasion." Miller dropped the photo. It fluttered to the deck, landing face up. "I also have the audio recording of that meeting," Julius continued relentlessly. "Conrad told you that he owned you. He told you that when he called you would answer, and you agreed. You sold your badge for 50 grand, Miller. That is cheap." Miller looked at his deputies. "Leave," he ordered, his voice shaking. "Go back to the car." "But Sheriff," one of them started. "Go," Miller screamed. The deputies scrambled down the gangway, leaving Miller alone with us. The king of the county was suddenly just a man, standing on a boat, holding a bottle of bleach he didn't know how to use. Julius stepped closer, invading Miller's personal space. "I recommended you for this job, Miller. I signed off on your background check because I thought you were useful. I thought you were a patriot, but it turns out you are just a whore for a real estate developer." "Please," Miller whispered, the fight draining out of him. "Conrad forced me. He said he would ruin me if I didn't help him. He said he would release the photos himself." "Conrad is going to ruin you anyway," Julius said. "But I can do worse than ruin you. I can bury you. I can send you to a federal prison where the inmates don't like cops. I can seize your pension. I can make sure your family loses their house. I can erase you, Miller." Miller dropped the bleach bottle. It rolled across the deck, thumping against the railing. He slumped against the cabin wall, defeated. "What do you want?" he asked, burying his face in his hands. "I can't testify against him. He has guys, dangerous guys. He will kill me." "I don't want you to testify," Julius said. "Not yet. You are useless to me on the stand because you are dirty. A defense attorney would tear you apart." Julius looked at me, giving me the signal. It was my turn. I walked up to Miller. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small black device. It was no bigger than a quarter. It was a high-frequency listening device, one of my own designs, modified by Julius's tech team. "I want you to be a friend," I said, holding the device out to him. "I want you to be the supportive, corrupt sheriff that Hunter Remington thinks you are." Miller looked at the device. "What is that?" "It is a wire," I said, "but not the kind you wear. I built this. It has a range of 2 miles and a battery life of 48 hours. It is magnetic." I pressed it into his hand. "You are going to see Hunter tomorrow," I said. "You are going to tell him that the boat is clean. You are going to tell him that the evidence is gone. You are going to tell him that he is safe." Miller nodded, swallowing hard. "Okay, I can do that." And then I continued leaning in close, my voice dropping to a whisper. "You are going to give him a hug. You are going to pat him on the back. You are going to tell him everything is going to be all right. And while you are doing that, you are going to slip this into the lining of his jacket, or stick it to the metal button on his cuff. I don't care how you do it, Miller, but you are going to plant this on him." "Why Hunter?" Miller asked. "Conrad is the brains. Hunter is just the idiot's son." "Exactly," Julius said. "Conrad is too careful. He sweeps his office for bugs every day. He speaks in code. But Hunter is arrogant. Hunter is stupid. And right now, Hunter is scared. He is going to talk. He is going to brag to his mistress. He is going to cry to his daddy. And we are going to hear every single word." Miller looked at the device in his hand. It was his only way out. It was the only lifeline he had left. "If I do this," he said, looking up at Julius, his eyes pleading, "if I get you the audio, will you bury the photos? Will you let me retire quietly?" Julius didn't smile. He didn't offer forgiveness. He offered a transaction. "If you do this," Julius said, "I will let you resign with your pension intact. You will move to another state. You will never wear a badge again. And if you ever speak to Conrad Remington, I will burn your life to the ground. Do we have a deal?" Miller nodded rapidly. "Deal. I will do it. I am meeting Hunter for lunch tomorrow. He wants an update on the investigation. I will do it then." "Good," Julius said. "Now get off this boat, and take your bleach with you. This is a crime scene, Miller. Show some respect." Miller grabbed the bleach bottle and ran. He scurried down the gangway and into his patrol car, peeling out of the parking lot as if the devil himself was chasing him. I watched him go, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. We had turned him. The man who had locked me up was now my spy. Julius walked over to the railing where Zoe had gone over. He looked down at the dark water. "He is terrified," Julius said. "A terrified man is a useful man. He will plant the bug." I stood beside him, looking at the spot where my daughter had fallen. "Hunter is going to the gala tomorrow night," I said. "He is going to be wearing his best suit, the blue one with the gold buttons." Julius nodded. "And he is going to be broadcasting live to us." I looked at my brother. "Do you think the sheriff will flip back?" I asked. "Do you think Conrad can buy him again?" Julius lit a cigarette, the flame illuminating the hard lines of his face. "Conrad pays with money," Julius said. "I pay with freedom. Miller knows that money is useless if you are in a cage. He won't flip back. He wants to survive." We stood there for a moment, two old men on a boat, reclaiming the territory. The wind was picking up, smelling of salt and coming storms. "Let us get the evidence," I said, turning to the cabin. "I need to find the access panel for the security system. I installed a backup hard drive in the keel 3 years ago. Hunter doesn't know it exists." "You think it is still there?" Julius asked. I smiled. I welded the box shut and painted it to look like a ballast tank. "It is there, and it has the video of them throwing her over." We went to work. For the next 2 hours I was not a victim. I was an engineer. I crawled into the bilge of the yacht, the space cramped and smelling of diesel. I found the false panel. I used my pocket torch to cut through the paint seal. There it was, the black box, the digital memory of the boat. I pulled it out, holding it like it was a holy relic. This was it. This was the sword that would cut the head off the snake. I climbed out of the bilge covered in grease and sweat. I handed the drive to Julius. "We have them," I said. Julius took the drive. His eyes were cold. "Not yet," he said. "We have the bullet. Now we need the gun. We wait for Miller to plant the bug. We wait for Hunter to confess on tape. We need them to feel safe one last time." We left the yacht, sealing it back up, leaving no trace that we had been there. As we drove away from the marina, I looked back at the boat bobbing in the water. It looked peaceful, innocent, but inside, it held the darkest secret of the Remington family. And tomorrow night at the gala, that secret was going to come out screaming. The police were ours. The evidence was ours. The trap was set. All we needed now was for the rats to walk into it. The Gilded Lady was glowing like a diamond floating on ink. From the end of the pier, I watched the yacht bob gently in the harbor, its decks awash in soft amber light and the flash of paparazzi cameras. It was a sickening display of wealth and hypocrisy. Just 72 hours ago, this vessel had been a crime scene, a place of blood and terror, where my daughter screamed for her life. Now it was the venue for the Remington Foundation Gala, a $5,000 a plate charity event designed to wash Conrad's reputation clean and refill his empty coffers with donations from the city's elite. String quartets played Mozart on the upper deck, drowning out the memory of the ocean's roar. Waiters in white tuxedos circulated with silver trays of champagne, stepping over the exact spot where Hunter had dragged Zoe by her hair. The guests laughed and clinked glasses, oblivious to the fact that they were standing on a floating coffin. They were the titans of industry, the politicians and the socialites, all there to kiss the ring of Conrad Remington. I saw Conrad holding court near the bow. He looked revitalized. The gray pallor of the police station was gone, replaced by the flushed confidence of a man who believes he has gotten away with murder. He was shaking hands, accepting condolences for the tragedy, with a solemn nod, before pivoting immediately to ask for campaign contributions. And Hunter, my son-in-law, was standing by the bar. He wasn't grieving, he was preening. He wore a white dinner jacket that made him look like a movie star. He was laughing with a group of young debutantes, his hand resting casually on the waist of a blonde woman who looked disturbingly like Tiffany. He looked like a man without a care in the world, a man who had successfully erased his past and was ready to spend his future. I stood in the shadows of the marina parking lot, adjusting the cuffs of my old navy blue suit. It was 20 years old, a little tight in the shoulders and smelled faintly of mothballs. Beside me, Julius stood like a statue carved from granite. He wasn't wearing a suit, he was wearing his full dress whites, the uniform of a Coast Guard admiral, complete with a rack of medals that told the story of 40 years of service. He looked terrifying. "Are you ready, Luther?" Julius asked, his voice low and steady. I looked at the yacht one last time. I touched the pocket where the USB drive with the video evidence sat against my chest. "I have been ready for 3 days," I said. "Let us go crash a party." We walked down the long wooden pier, our footsteps heavy and rhythmic. We didn't hurry. We walked with the inevitable momentum of a coming storm. The security guards at the base of the gangway saw us approaching. They were big men with earpieces and clipboards, the gatekeepers of high society. They saw an old black man in a cheap suit, and they stepped forward to block the path, their faces setting into sneers of dismissal. They didn't even look at Julius. They only saw me. "Sir, this is a private event," the lead guard said, holding up a hand. "The service entrance is around the back if you are looking for the kitchen." I didn't stop walking. I didn't even slow down. "I am not looking for the kitchen," I said, my eyes locked on the figure of Conrad Remington, who had just turned to look at the commotion. Conrad squinted into the darkness. When he recognized me, his smile vanished. For a second, I saw fear, a flicker of panic that I was out of jail and on his turf. But he crushed it down, instantly replaced by a wave of arrogant rage. He excused himself from his guests and stormed down the gangway to meet us at the dock, his face twisting into a snarl. "What the hell are you doing here?" Conrad hissed, stopping 3 feet from me. "I thought I made it clear. You are not welcome anywhere near my family." I looked him up and down. "I am here for the gala, Conrad," I said calmly. "I hear the shrimp cocktail is excellent." Conrad laughed, a harsh, barking sound that drew the attention of the nearby guests. "This is a $5,000 ticket event, Luther," he spat, his voice dripping with venom. "This isn't a soup kitchen. This isn't a handout line. This is for the elite, people who matter, not washed-up mechanics who try to drown their own daughters." He stepped closer, invading my personal space, trying to intimidate me with his height and his money. "Get off my dock," he growled. "You are embarrassing yourself. Look at you. You are wearing a suit that looks like it came from a dead man. You don't belong here. You are dirt, Luther. You are nothing but dirty street trash trying to rub shoulders with kings. Get out before I have security throw you in the water where you belong." The racial slur hung in the air unspoken, but loud and clear in his tone. Trash. Dirt. You people. The guests on the deck were watching now, leaning over the railings, whispering. They saw a billionaire kicking out a beggar. They saw the narrative Conrad had spun, playing out in real time. Hunter appeared at the railing above us, a champagne flute in his hand. He looked down, his lip curled in a sneer. "Go home, old man," Hunter shouted, laughing. "You can't afford the air we breathe." Julius stepped forward then. He moved from my shadow into the light, the gold braid on his shoulders catching the gleam of the dock lamps. Conrad's eyes flicked to him, and he frowned, confused by the uniform, confused by the sheer presence of the man standing beside me. I reached into the inner pocket of my cheap suit. The guards tensed, reaching for their belts. Conrad flinched, thinking I was pulling a gun. But I didn't pull a gun. I pulled a small, sleek rectangle of metal. It was a titanium black card. The kind that doesn't have a limit. The kind you get by invitation only. I held it up, catching the light. "I didn't buy a ticket, Conrad," I said, my voice projecting loud and clear over the water, silencing the whispers on the deck. "I don't need a ticket." Conrad looked at the card, his brow furrowing. "What is that? Did you steal that?" I took a step forward, forcing him to take a step back. "I am here to handle a business matter," I said. "You see, there seems to be a misunderstanding about ownership." "Ownership," Conrad scoffed. "This is my yacht. I am the owner. Get him out of here." "No," I said. "You are the lessee." The word hung in the air. Hunter stopped laughing. He gripped the railing, his knuckles turning white. "You lease this boat from a holding company," I continued, my voice rising, carrying the authority of a captain on his bridge. "A company called Vance Marine Technologies. You pay $20,000 a month, or you used to. You are 90 days in arrears, Conrad." Conrad's face went pale. "How do you know that? Who told you that?" "I know because I am Vance Marine," I roared. The silence that fell over the marina was absolute. The string quartet stopped playing. The waiters stopped serving. Every eye was fixed on the old mechanic in the cheap suit. "I founded Vance Marine 30 years ago," I said, staring into Conrad's soul. "I hold the patents on the stabilization systems used in this hull. I built this company with my own hands while you were inheriting yours. I am the chairman of the board. I am the majority shareholder." I took another step and Conrad stumbled back, almost tripping over the gangway. "This isn't your boat, Conrad," I said. "It is mine, and I am here to repossess it." The crowd on the deck gasped. A ripple of shock went through the elite. The man they thought was a billionaire was just a renter. The man they thought was a pauper was the landlord. Hunter looked like he was going to be sick. He knew Vance Marine. He knew the name. He just never knew the man behind it. "You are lying," Conrad screamed, his voice cracking. "You are a mechanic. You fix trucks." "I fix problems," I corrected him. "And you are a problem." I turned to the head of security who was looking from me to Conrad, unsure of who signed his checks. "I am revoking the lease effective immediately," I told the guard holding up the card. "This is now a trespassing situation, and since I am the owner, I am inviting everyone to stay. Except for them," I pointed at Conrad and Hunter. "But before you kick them off," I added, looking up at the guests, who were now filming with their phones, "I have a little entertainment planned, a special presentation for the gala." I looked at Julius. The Admiral smiled, a cold, terrifying smile. "Plug it in," Julius said. I walked up the gangway past a stunned Conrad, past the confused guards, and stepped onto the deck of my ship. I walked to the main entertainment console, where a massive LED screen was set up to show a slideshow of Conrad's fake philanthropy. I pulled the USB drive from my pocket. Hunter realized what was happening. He scrambled toward me, pushing guests out of the way. "Stop him," Hunter screamed. "Don't let him touch that." But Julius was there. He stepped in front of Hunter, an immovable object. "Sit down, son," Julius growled. "The show is just starting." I plugged the drive in. The screen flickered, and then the truth, 10 feet tall and high definition, lit up the night. The massive LED screen behind the stage flickered once, then went black. The charity slideshow of smiling orphans and Conrad Remington shaking hands with dignitaries vanished. The music cut out with a sharp screech of feedback that made half the guests cover their ears. A hush fell over the deck of the Gilded Lady. It wasn't the respectful silence of a gala audience. It was the confused, uneasy silence of people who realized the script had just been flipped. I stood by the console, my hand still on the drive. I looked out at the sea of expensive tuxedos and designer gowns. I saw the confusion on their faces. I saw the waiters pausing with their trays. And in the center of it all, I saw Conrad and Hunter. Conrad was staring at the blank screen, his mouth open in a silent shout of outrage. Hunter looked around wildly, his eyes darting from the screen to me. He knew. In that split second before the first pixel lit up, He knew exactly what was about to happen. He lunged toward the stage, his face twisted in panic. "Cut the power," he screamed at the technicians. "Turn it off." But it was too late. I had bypassed the main controls. I had locked the system. The only way to stop this video was to sink the ship. I looked at Hunter, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see the man who had stolen my daughter. I saw a ghost, a man whose life was already over. He just didn't know it yet. "Watch closely," I said into the microphone, my voice booming over the deck speakers. "Watch closely, and tell me if this looks like an accident." I hit play. The screen exploded into light. It wasn't a slideshow. It was high-definition night vision footage. The timestamp in the corner read, 3 days ago, 11:58 p.m. The image was crisp, showing the aft deck of this very yacht. The guests gasped as they recognized the setting. They were standing on the crime scene. On the screen, Zoe appeared. She looked terrified, clutching her belly. Next to her was Hunter, holding a glass of scotch. And sitting like a king was Conrad. The audio kicked in. It was crystal clear, amplified by the concert-grade speakers of the gala. "Sign the paper," Zoe Hunter's recorded voice sneered. "Stop being so selfish." A ripple went through the crowd. This wasn't the grieving widower they had seen on the news. This was a bully. "I am not signing," Zoe's voice replied, shaking but firm. Then the slap. The sound of Hunter's hand hitting my daughter's face echoed across the deck like a gunshot. A woman in the front row screamed and covered her mouth. A glass shattered somewhere in the back. On screen, I stepped forward. I saw myself fight the guards. I saw them pin me down. And then came the moment that would end the Remington legacy forever. Hunter grabbed Zoe. The camera angle was perfect. It showed the rage in his eyes. It showed the cold calculation in Conrad's movements as he stood up to help. "You useless woman," Hunter's voice boomed over the silent crowd. "If you won't sign, then you are worth more to me dead." The crowd was paralyzed. They were witnessing a murder. They saw Hunter drag his pregnant wife to the railing. They saw her fight. They heard her beg, "Please, Hunter, not me, the baby. It is your son." I looked at the real Hunter standing on the dance floor. He was frozen, staring at the screen, his face drained of all color. He looked like a statue of terror. On the screen, the moment of truth arrived. Conrad grabbed her legs. Hunter grabbed her arms. "Daddy," she screamed. And then they threw her. They didn't slip. They didn't stumble. They heaved her over the side with a coordinated effort. Splash. The sound of her hitting the water was sickening. But the video didn't end there. This was the part they hadn't expected. This was the part that proved it wasn't just a crime of passion, but a crime of pure evil. The camera zoomed in on Conrad and Hunter, standing by the rail looking down into the black water. "Shame," Conrad said on the screen, lighting a cigar. "Tragic accident. Drunk black woman slips on a wet deck. Very sad. Who is going to believe the old mechanic?" The racial slur hung in the air, amplified and undeniable. The elite crowd, predominantly white but sensitive to their image, recoiled as if they had been physically struck. Conrad Remington, the philanthropist, the pillar of the community, had just revealed himself to be a racist murderer in front of the entire city. Then came the laughter. Hunter laughed. It was a high, nervous sound, but it was laughter. "We need to get rid of him, Dad," Hunter said, pointing at me on the screen. "Put him in the dinghy," Conrad ordered. "Let him drift." The screen went black. The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavy, suffocating. No one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the wind in the rigging and the soft lap of the waves against the hull. Then the murmurs started. It began as a low buzz and grew rapidly into a roar of outrage. People were turning to look at Conrad and Hunter with expressions of pure revulsion. Hunter snapped. The reality of his exposure broke something in his mind. He screamed a raw animal sound of denial and rage. "It is fake," he shrieked, pointing at the screen. "It is CGI. He made it up." He ran toward the stage, his eyes wild. He grabbed a heavy metal microphone stand. "Turn it off," he screamed, swinging the stand at the LED wall. "Stop looking at it." He smashed the stand against the screen, shattering a panel of lights. Sparks showered down. He swung again and again, trying to kill the image, trying to murder the truth. "Stop him," someone shouted. But before security could move, before Conrad could formulate a lie, The doors to the VIP elevator slid open with a soft chime. The sound cut through Hunter's tantrum. He stopped, panting, the microphone stand raised above his head. He turned to look. The elevator was backlit, casting long shadows. First came Julius. He stepped out, his dress white uniform, glowing in the stage lights, his face set in a mask of grim determination. He looked like the hand of God, arriving to deliver judgment. And then he turned and pushed a wheelchair out onto the deck. Sitting in the chair was Zoe. She was wearing a hospital gown, covered by a long coat, but her injuries were visible. The cast on her arm, the bandage on her forehead, the bruises on her neck that matched the shape of Hunter's hands. But her head was high. Her eyes were dry. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a queen, returning to reclaim her throne. The crowd gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the air out of the deck. They had been told she was dead. They had been told she was crazy. They had been told she was a drunk. And here she was, broken but unbroken. Hunter dropped the microphone stand. It clattered to the deck, rolling away. He stared at her, his mouth opening and closing. "Zoe," he whispered. Zoe looked at him. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. "Hello, Hunter," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but in the silence of the stunned crowd, it carried to the back of the deck. Hunter took a step toward her. His hands were shaking. He looked like he wanted to touch her to verify she was real, or maybe to finish what he started. "Babe," he stammered, a sick smile trying to form on his face. "You are alive. Oh, thank God. I was so worried. It was all a mistake, I can explain." He took another step, reaching out. Julius stepped in front of the wheelchair. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't raise a hand. He just stood there, a wall of white uniform and steel resolve. "Don't touch my father," Zoe said. Her voice was ice. It was the voice of a woman who had drowned and come back as something else. Hunter stopped. He looked at Julius, then at Zoe. "Zoe, please," he begged, the desperation leaking into his tone. "I am your husband. I love you. We can fix this. Just tell them. Tell them it was a misunderstanding." Zoe looked at the crowd. She looked at the faces of the people who had donated money to her murderers. "There is no misunderstanding, Hunter," she said. "You threw me off this boat to pay your gambling debts. You killed the girl who loved you." She pointed at the screen where the shattered image still flickered. "But you didn't kill the mother of your son, and that was your mistake." The crowd erupted. It wasn't just murmurs anymore. It was shouting. People were demanding answers. People were calling for the police. The veneer of the gala had been stripped away, revealing the rot underneath. Conrad was trying to push his way through the crowd toward the gangway, his face pale and sweaty, but he was blocked by a wall of angry donors. "Let me through," he shouted. "I am Conrad Remington. You are a murderer," a woman in a diamond necklace shouted, spitting at his feet. I stood by the console watching it all. The chaos, the anger, the justice. I looked at Zoe sitting there in her wheelchair, protected by her uncle, and I felt a fierce pride burn in my chest. We had done it. We had turned the lights on, and the cockroaches had nowhere left to hide. Conrad Remington stood in the center of the deck, surrounded by the elite of the city, his face a mask of purple rage. The video screen behind him had gone black, but the image of him throwing my daughter overboard was burned into the retinas of every person there. He looked at the crowd, then at me, then at the camera crew that was broadcasting his downfall live to the internet. He didn't crumble. He didn't cry. He did what narcissists always do when cornered. He attacked. "That is a lie," Conrad screamed, his voice cracking under the strain. "It is a deep fake. It is computer-generated. Look at him. He is a mechanic. He hired some hacker to ruin my reputation." He pointed a shaking finger at me. "I will sue you," he roared. "I will sue you for defamation. I will sue you for trespassing. I will take every penny you have and bury you under legal fees for the next 20 years. Security, get them off my boat. Now!" He looked around for his guards, but they weren't moving. They were looking at the screen, then at him, calculating the odds. They were mercenaries, and they knew a sinking ship when they saw one. "Do your jobs," Conrad bellowed, veins bulging in his neck. "I pay you to protect me. Throw this trash into the ocean." But nobody moved. The guests were backing away, creating a wide circle around him as if you were radioactive. The whispers had stopped, replaced by a heavy, judgmental silence. Conrad was alone, screaming into the void, clinging to a power that had already evaporated. "You think you can destroy me?" he spat, turning on the crowd. "I am Conrad Remington. I built this city. I own the police. I own the judges. This is nothing but a momentary glitch, a misunderstanding." He fixed his eyes on me, his expression twisting into a sneer of pure hatred. "You are nothing, Luther. You are a bug, and I am going to squash you." I didn't say a word. I just looked past him toward the VIP elevator, where the doors were sliding open again. Conrad followed my gaze. He expected backup. He expected his lawyers. He expected salvation. Instead, he saw Sheriff Miller. But Miller wasn't alone. Behind him walked 6 agents in blue windbreakers, with the yellow letters FBI stenciled on the back. And behind them were 2 men in dark suits, carrying briefcases that looked heavy with indictments. Conrad's face went slack. He looked at Miller, confusion warring with fear. "Miller," he barked, trying to regain his footing. "Thank God. Arrest these people. They hijacked my event. They slandered me." Miller walked down the ramp toward the stage. He didn't look like the terrified man on the boat the night before. He looked like a man who had picked the winning side. He stopped in front of Conrad and pulled a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. Conrad Remington Miller said, his voice booming over the speakers, "You are under arrest." Conrad laughed a short, hysterical sound. "Are you joking, Miller? Do you know who I am? I made you. You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Zoe Remington Miller," continued, ignoring the outburst, "and for the first-degree murder of Richard Grimes, committed 25 years ago." The mention of my son's name hit the crowd like a physical blow. I saw Damien's ghost in that moment, standing right beside me, finally getting the justice he deserved. "Murder," Conrad whispered, the color draining from his face. "You have no proof. We have everything," Conrad Miller said. "We have the video, we have the financial records, we have the wiretaps, and we have the testimony of your son." Hunter looked up from where he was cowering by the stage. "What?" he shrieked. "I didn't say anything." The FBI agents moved in. They didn't speak. They just acted. 2 of them grabbed Conrad, forcing his arms behind his back. The click of the handcuffs was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. It echoed across the water, signaling the end of an era. 2 other agents grabbed Hunter. He didn't fight. He went limp, sobbing like a child. "Dad, do something," Hunter wailed. "Dad, fix it." But Conrad couldn't fix it. He was being marched toward the gangway, his head bowed, his empire crumbling with every step. "Wait," I said, stepping forward. The agents paused. I walked up to Conrad. I wanted to look him in the eye one last time. "You were right about one thing, Conrad," I said softly. "It is about math." I pointed to Julius, who was standing by the DJ booth holding a microphone. Julius didn't look at Conrad. He looked at the crowd of wealthy donors who were watching the scene with a mixture of horror and fascination. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julius said, his voice calm and authoritative, "before you leave, I suggest you check your phones." A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. People reached into their pockets and purses, pulling out their devices. "The First National Bank just issued a press release," Julius continued. "The Remington Corporation has been declared insolvent. Their assets have been seized to cover a $45 million debt fraud." He paused, letting the words sink in. "That includes this yacht. That includes the Remington Tower. That includes the mansions in the Hamptons. And it includes the charity accounts you all donated to tonight." Gasps of outrage erupted from the crowd. People started checking their banking apps, screaming as they realized their donations had vanished into a black hole of debt. "It is all gone," Julius said. "Every dime. Conrad Remington has been bankrupt for 5 years. He has been paying his debts with your money. A classic Ponzi scheme built on a foundation of murder." Conrad looked at the crowd. He saw his friends, his allies, his peers, looking at him with pure loathing. He wasn't just a murderer to them anymore. He was a thief. He had stolen from his own tribe. And that was the one sin they would never forgive. "Take him away," Miller said, shoving Conrad forward. As they dragged him off the boat, Conrad didn't scream. He didn't fight. He just looked at me with dead eyes, knowing that he had been beaten by the mechanic he thought was trash. Hunter was still on the deck weeping, his hands cuffed behind his back. He looked at Zoe, who was sitting in her wheelchair, watching him with a face made of stone. "Zoe?" he blubbered, falling to his knees. "Zoe, please. Tell them. Tell them I didn't mean it. I was scared. My dad made me do it. I love you, baby. Think of our son." He tried to crawl toward her, dragging his knees across the teak deck. "We can start over," he pleaded. "I will testify against him. I will do whatever you want. Just don't let them take me to prison. I can't survive in there, Zoe." Zoe looked down at him. She looked at the man she had married, the man she had carried a child for, the man who had thrown her into the ocean to pay a gambling debt. She reached for her left hand. Slowly, deliberately, she pulled the diamond ring off her finger. It was a big rock, flashy and expensive, or at least it looked expensive. I knew now it was probably fake, just like everything else about him. She held it up, catching the stage lights. "You want this back?" Zoe asked, her voice cold and flat. Hunter nodded eagerly, hope flaring in his eyes. "Yes, baby. Yes. We can fix this." Zoe looked at the ring, then at the dark water over the railing. "You threw me away for money," she said. "You threw our son away for a debt." She turned back to him. "This ring is the only thing you ever gave me that was real," she said. "And it is heavy, Hunter. It is dragging me down." She threw it. It arced through the air, spinning in the light before disappearing over the railing with a tiny splash. Hunter screamed a sound of pure anguish, as if she had thrown his heart overboard. "Goodbye, Hunter," Zoe said, turning her wheelchair away. The agents hauled him up. He was screaming, kicking, fighting, crying for his wife, crying for his father, crying for the life he had destroyed. They dragged him down the gangway, past the glaring guests, past the cameras, past the wreckage of his own greed. I walked over to Zoe and put my hand on her shoulder. She was trembling, but her eyes were dry. "Is it over, Daddy?" she asked quietly. I looked at the empty spot where Conrad had stood. I looked at the police cars flashing in the distance, taking the monsters away. "It is over, baby," I said. "They are gone." Julius walked over, flanking her other side. "The bank just confirmed the seizure," he said. "The Remington name is dust." Zoe took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the clean salt air. She looked at me, then at Julius, and finally at the ocean. "Let us go home," she said. I nodded. I took the handles of her wheelchair. We walked off the Gilded Lady, leaving the elite to their scandal and their shock. We walked down the pier, 3 Grimes against the world. We had won. But as I looked at my daughter's broken arm and the haunted look in her eyes, I knew the real work was just beginning. Healing was harder than fighting, but we were Grimes. And we didn't break, we just rebuilt stronger. 6 months later, the gavel came down in the federal courthouse, and the sound was louder than any gunshot. It was the sound of a steel door slamming shut forever. I sat in the front row between Zoe and Julius, watching the final act of the Remington tragedy play out. Conrad Remington stood to receive his sentence. He had lost 30 pounds. His hair was white, and his expensive suit hung off him like a shroud. He didn't look at the judge. He looked at the floor. His arrogance finally stripped away, leaving only a hollow shell of a man. Hunter stood beside him, shaking. He looked at Zoe one last time, his eyes pleading for a mercy he hadn't shown her on the boat. Zoe didn't blink. She held her head high, her hand resting protectively on the baby carrier beside her. "We, the jury, find the defendants guilty on all counts," the foreman read. "First-degree attempted murder, insurance fraud, conspiracy, racketeering." The judge, a woman with eyes like flint, didn't waste time on speeches. "Conrad Remington and Hunter Remington," she said, her voice echoing in the silent courtroom. "Your crimes were born of a greed so profound it eclipsed your humanity. You treated human lives as collateral for your debts. For the attempted murder of Zoe Remington and her unborn child, and for the decades of financial crimes you have committed, I sentence you both to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole." Conrad closed his eyes. Hunter let out a sob that sounded like a wounded animal. The bailiffs moved in. The click of the handcuffs was final. As they were led away, Conrad looked at me. There was no hate left in his eyes, just the terrifying realization that he was going to die in a cage. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just felt a heavy weight lift off my chest. A weight I had been carrying since the moment I jumped into the Atlantic. Justice wasn't about happiness, it was about balance, and the scales had finally tipped back. Outside on the courthouse steps, the reporters were waiting, but we didn't stop. We walked past them, Julius clearing a path just like he had at the hospital. We got into the SUV and drove away, leaving the Remingtons to the wolves. But prison is a complicated place, and sometimes justice needs a little help to be truly poetic. A week after the sentencing, Julius and I sat on my porch drinking iced tea. He slid a piece of paper across the table to me. It was a report from a contact inside the federal penitentiary where Hunter was being held. "He is in protective custody," Julius said, taking a sip of his drink. "But protective custody has a price." I read the report. Hunter hadn't lasted 2 days in general population before he was crying for help. He was a soft boy in a hard world. But Julius hadn't let them hurt him. That would be too easy. Death was an escape. Suffering was a sentence. "I made a few calls," Julius continued, his voice devoid of pity. "I made sure the guards know who he is. I made sure the other inmates know what he did. Throwing a pregnant woman off a boat doesn't earn you respect inside Luther. Even criminals have codes." He leaned back, looking at the sunset. "He is safe," Julius said. "He won't be shanked. He won't be beaten to death. But he will never have a moment of peace. He will spend the next 50 years looking over his shoulder, terrified of his own shadow. He will work in the laundry for 12 cents an hour, washing the stains out of other men's clothes, just like he tried to wash away his crimes. And every night, when the lights go out, he will hear the ocean. It was a dark justice, a cold justice. But it was the only kind Hunter understood. He had wanted to live like a king. Now he would live like a rat. Life, however, is for the living, and we had a lot of living to do. 3 months after the trial, I drove up the winding driveway of the old Remington estate. The iron gates, which used to bear the gilded R, were gone, replaced by a simple wooden sign, the Zoe Grimes home. I had bought the property at the foreclosure auction for pennies on the dollar. The bank was happy to get rid of it, and Julius had ensured there were no other bidders. I parked the truck and walked into the garden. It was full of life. Children were playing on the lawn, their laughter chasing away the ghosts of Conrad's greed. Zoe was sitting on a bench holding her son, my grandson Luther, Julius Grimes. We called him L.J. She looked up as I approached. She was glowing. The shadows under her eyes were gone, replaced by the light of a mother who knows her child is safe. Her arm had healed, though she still had a scar, a permanent reminder of her survival. "Hey, Daddy," she said, smiling. I sat down beside her, looking at the baby. He was sleeping, his tiny hand gripping her finger. He was perfect. He looked like her. He had the Grimes chin. "The contractors finished the west wing today," I said, looking at the mansion. "We have room for 20 more beds, 20 more women and children who need a safe place to land." Zoe looked at the house. It wasn't a monument to ego anymore. It was a sanctuary. "Hunter always hated this garden," she said softly. "He said it was too messy. He wanted to pave it over and put in a tennis court." I laughed. "Well, he is paving things now, just not tennis courts." Zoe leaned her head on my shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saving us, for saving him." I kissed the top of her head. "I didn't save you, baby," I said. "I just kept you afloat until you learned how to swim." That evening we took the yacht out. I had renamed her. The Gilded Lady was gone, painted over and forgotten. The stern now bore the name The Phoenix, painted in bold gold letters. We sailed out past the breakwater, past the spot where the nightmare had begun. The ocean was calm tonight, a sheet of purple and gold under the setting sun. Julius was at the helm, steering with the easy grace of a man who had spent his life at sea. I sat on the aft deck with Zoe and LJ. We cut the engines and drifted in the silence. It wasn't a scary silence anymore. It was peaceful. Zoe stood up and walked to the railing. She looked down into the water. For a long time, she didn't say anything. She just watched the waves, facing the abyss that had almost taken her. Then, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. It was the last gift Hunter had given her, a diamond necklace he had bought with stolen money. She opened the box and let the necklace slide out. It glittered in the twilight, a serpent of gold and ice. She didn't throw it, she just let it go. It fell, hitting the water with a tiny plip, and vanished, instantly, swallowed by the deep. She turned back to us, her face serene. "I am not afraid of the water anymore," she said. Julius came down from the bridge holding 2 glasses of lemonade and a bottle for the baby. He handed me a glass and sat down, stretching his long legs. "To the Omega Protocol," he said, raising his glass. "To family," I corrected him, clinking my glass against his. We sat there as the stars came out, 3 generations of Grimes. We were battered, we were scarred, but we were here. The world had tried to drown us. It had tried to crush us with debt and lies and violence. But they forgot what we were made of. They forgot that you can't drown a family that knows how to build its own rafts. I looked at my grandson sleeping peacefully in the salt air. I looked at my brother, the warrior, who had come when I called. And I looked at my daughter, the queen, who had risen from the dead. Conrad and Hunter were rotting in concrete boxes. Their legacy turned to dust. But us, we were just getting started. I am Luther Grimes. I am a mechanic. I am a father. And if you come for my family, you better bring more than a yacht. You better bring an army, because we are the storm you didn't see coming. Hit like and subscribe if you know the value of a family that fights back. And remember, the ocean is deep, but blood is thicker than water. This journey taught me that true power isn't about the money in your bank account or the title next to your name. It is about the lengths you will go to protect the people you love. Hunter and Conrad had millions, but they were bankrupt in spirit. They thought they could buy the world, but they couldn't buy loyalty or courage. I learned that sometimes you have to let the people who hurt you believe they have won, just so you can show them what real strength looks like when it matters most. Family isn't who you are related to. It is who you are willing to bleed for. If you believe that justice is worth fighting for, hit that like button and share this story. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to stand up to someone who thought you were nothing? I want to hear your story. Don't forget to subscribe for more tales of justice served cold. Until next time.